You can support the author on Patreon, link is in the description.
Chapter 26, the new chapter begins. 3. Harry breathed out a sigh of relief when Mount Greylock finally came into his view. He released a yawn and stretched himself to get off the dizziness. The bus ride wasn't bad, in fact, it was really nice. It could have been much better if his seatmate wasn't such a stuck-up bitch. The girl was way more interested in reading fashion magazines, instead in having a chat with him. Well, he will admit his mistake, he never bothered to give her his name, but he was kind of famous and he didn't want to be hounded by everyone on the bus. When he tried to start a conversation, the girl simply scoffed at him and told him to mind his own business. Not that Harry was overly bothered by her bitchiness, but he still had some questions in his mind. The bus ride wasn't so bad. Harry grinned internally as he stared outside the window. The bus was approaching ingress and he couldn't help but feel excited at the prospect of getting his wand and all that. True. I think they have only used magic to increase the comfort as high as possible and to improve the speed by a small margin. Lily wondered aloud inside Harry's mind, and Harry simply hummed with a thoughtful look on his face. He wasn't an expert when it came to enchanting, so he decided to ask his charms professor to confirm his mom's theory. Or maybe you could ask Jacqueline, Lily suggested, and this time, Harry simply inclined his head in acknowledgement. Jacqueline is in the House of Wampus. I wonder how she is going to react if I am not sorted in her house, Harry mused as his mind started to wander about random stuff. If she really cares about you, then she wouldn't mind. In fact, I think she will be happy. Lily tried to comfort Harry even though she wasn't a big fan of Jacqueline, but she knew that Harry needed companionship. She would never ask her son not to make any friends. You are probably right, Harry muttered internally as the bus finally came to stop right in front of the dirt road leading to Ilvermorny. Students, we are here. First years, fifth year prefects are already waiting for you. They will lead you to the school. The conductor exclaimed cheerfully as he pointed outside the window. Harry followed where the man was pointing with his gaze and found 4 bigger silhouettes standing at the side of the dirt road along with a lot of smaller-sized silhouettes. The girl sitting beside him stood up with a huff and after grabbing her trunk from the luggage rack, she left the bus. The girl was probably 13 or 14, so it would probably make her a second year or a third year. Harry gave her a last look before he also stood up to grab his trunk from the luggage rack. Using magic would have made his task much easier, but he wanted to keep the existence of his secondary wand a secret from everyone. Carlson probably already knew about his wand, and Jacqueline had seen him using his wand, but he wasn't planning to make his secondary wand public knowledge. Harry grabbed his trunk and with a strong yank, he pulled down his trunk. If he was still small and scrawny, then the task would have been almost impossible for him, but he was no longer malnourished and scrawny. It took him a lot of gold to fix his body and he was quite satisfied with the results. Harry turned toward the door to leave, but before he could leave the bus, someone called him out. Are you a first year? Someone asked from behind. Harry turned around to find a boy of his age. Yes, are you also a first year? I am Harry, Harry said as he extended his hand toward the boy. For the time being, Harry decided to keep his last name to himself. Hello, I am Danny Birch, nice to meet you, and I am a first year too, the boy cheerfully introduced himself as he accepted Harry's offered hand and shook it. Harry opened his mouth to say something, but another bus arrived right beside their bus. Make it quick guys, we don't want to crowd this place, the conductor reminded everyone who was still on the bus. Let's go down and wait with the others, Harry suggested, and the boy nodded his head with a grin. Are you the first magical in your family? Danny asked curiously as the two of them climbed down the bus. The conductor noticed the lack of an emblem on both of their uniforms, so he wished them luck and pointed toward the prefects before Harry could answer Danny. Mumbling thanks under their breaths, the two of them climbed down from the bus and made their way toward the gathered crowd. No, I am half-blood, Harry answered, not willing to elaborate anymore. Cool. It must have been really amazing, right? I mean, growing up around magic. I am first magical from my family, Danny gushed out excitedly, and Harry couldn't help but smile at the boy. Discovering magic was one of the best things that ever happened to Harry. Yet. I know. It was amazing, Harry nodded his head in agreement. First years. One of the prefects noticed Harry and Danny and called out of them. Harry looked behind and noticed that the two of them weren't the only first years on their bus. Harry had noticed them before too, but with that girl sitting beside him, he couldn't start a conversation with the others, especially when he was sitting at the window seat. All of you stand with the others. We will be waiting for the last bus to arrive, and when the last bus arrives, we will start heading to the school, one of the female prefects explained with a gentle smile on her face. Harry along with the rest of the first years from his bus joined the first year group. Which house do you think you will be in? Danny asked in a low tone. The other first years were also chatting in low tones if they weren't looking around warily. I will be either in Horned Serpent or Wampus, and what about you? Harry asked as he provided his answer with a thoughtful look on his face. Cool, Danny whispered, looking really excited. But I don't know where I will be going. I have read about the houses, but I have no idea what I am good at. Danny shrugged as he explained. I see. I think all the houses are good and they have their own pros and their own cons, Harry explained, looking somewhat contemplative. Then let's be friends no matter which house we are in, Danny offered, and Harry simply smiled and nodded his head in agreement. To be honest, Harry was feeling somewhat out of the place. He never had a childhood, so unlike the other children around him, he was forced to grow up. Though Harry was quite happy to have someone to talk with, or he would have been bored out of his mind. After a couple of minutes, 2 more buses finally arrived, and after collecting the first years from those 2 buses, the prefects declared that they were done, and without waiting any more time, they started to lead everyone toward the school. Harry continued to chat with Danny, and nobody else decided to join the 2 of them in their conversation. Harry looked around to see how many first years were there, and to be honest, both Harry and Lily were surprised by the number. According to his mom, in their batch, there were somewhere around 60 students, and according to Lily, the numbers were decreasing with each year, and after the war, the numbers were bound to drop drastically. So, it was obvious that both Harry and Lily were surprised to see 153 students. Apparently, Ilvermorny was doing quite well. Though Lily immediately started to suspect that the British Ministry of Magic was up to something. The 2 entourage finally arrived at the school, and the prefects led the group of first years to the entrance hall where all of them were going to be sorted. All the prefects were standing in front of the statues representing their houses along with their respective head of the house. Harry stared toward the Wampus prefects to see if Jacqueline was there, but surprisingly, Jacqueline wasn't present there. Harry started to wonder why she wasn't present. All of the house heads stepped forward at the same time and gathered right outside the Gordian knot. Welcome to Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. My name is Thomas Grant and I am the head of the House of Thunderbird, but before we can proceed, all of you are going to be sorted into either of the 4 houses, Thomas explained. From the man's age, he was the oldest among the head of the houses. We are going to call your name one by one in order to their last name, and they will step into this Gordian knot, Thomas said as he pointed at the Gordian knot right in front of him. All of a sudden, Harry heard some shuffling from above, and he immediately raised his head to see what was happening. Apparently, the older students were going to watch the sorting from the circular balcony a floor above them. One of the statues will react to you and you will be sorted into that particular house. Now, let's begin. Thomas exclaimed as he clapped his hands in a dramatic fashion. After that, they started to call the students one by one. Danny was the 6th student they called. Danny nervously made his way toward the Gordian knot and stepped on it. After a few seconds, the statue of the Thunderbird started to react and the emblem of the Thunderbird house appeared on his robe. Some cheers were heard from the circular balcony above them as Danny was the first student who was sorted into the Thunderbird house. They continued to call names and the students continued to step forward, and after almost 15 minutes, they finally called Harry's name. Silence ensued throughout the hall and everyone seemed to be holding onto their breaths. The professors didn't look surprised, so Carlson probably told them. Only Harry's footsteps could be heard throughout the hall as he stepped into the Gordian knot. Murmurs finally broke out among the older students who were watching the sorting from the circular balcony. It seems that I am going to have a celebrity life, Harry mused in displeasure within the confines of his mind. Chapter 27, the new chapter begins, 4. Harry Potter, is he really that Harry Potter? But why would Harry Potter come here? I thought he would attend Hogwarts. That's not the boy who lived, he doesn't have the scar. Though he does have messy black hair and green eyes. Yummy. I wonder if he will teach us some awesome magic. Harry could obviously hear various types of murmurs from the circular balcony. He was already expecting reactions like this, but this was much worse than his expectations. He was barely holding himself back from cringing. Harry took a deep breath and decided to somehow hold together until he was sorted. Harry raised his head to stare at the 4 mascot statues representing each house, waiting to see which one was going to react to him. The Horned Serpent house is represented by the Horned Serpent statue. Sometimes, Horned Serpent is considered to represent the mind of a witch or wizard. That is why witches or wizards who seek knowledge are sorted in Horned Serpent. For the same reason, knowledge is favored the most in Horned Serpent. Unsurprisingly, the House of Horned Serpent is represented by the emblem of a horned serpent on uniforms. Image here. The Wampus House is represented by the Wampus statue. Sometimes, Wampus is considered to represent the body of a witch or wizard. That is why the witches and wizards with traits of a warrior were sorted into the House of Wampus. For the same reason, combatability is favored the most in the House of Wampus. Unsurprisingly, the House of Wampus is represented by the emblem of a Wampus on uniforms. Image here. The Thunderbird House is represented by the Thunderbird statue. Sometimes, Thunderbird is considered to represent the soul of a witch or wizard. Though, regardless of a Thunderbird's connection to a soul, witches and wizards who seek adventures are sorted into the House of Thunderbird. Unsurprisingly, the House of Thunderbird is represented by the emblem of a Thunderbird on uniforms. Image here. And finally, the House of Pukwudgie is represented by the Pukwudgie statue. Sometimes, Pukwudgie is considered to represent the heart of a witch or wizard. That is why healers were favored in the House of Pukwudgie, as without a good heart, you could never become a successful healer. For the same reason, witches and wizards with good hearts were sorted into the House of Pukwudgie. Unsurprisingly, the House of Pukwudgie was represented by the emblem of a Pukwudgie on uniforms. Image here. That is why Harry wasn't surprised when the statue of the horned serpent started to react to him. To be honest, it wasn't a surprise. At least, not to him. After all, he was quite aware of the fact that he loved reading. Not only that, he didn't have many traits of a warrior. True, he wanted to become the strongest, but that didn't mean he was a warrior, but a warrior can be related with the trust for power. The House of Horned Serpent cheered loudly, while a few voices could be heard complaining and whining. Ignoring all that, Harry simply started to make his way toward the prefects of Horned Serpent, who were waiting with the rest of the first years who were sorted into Horned Serpent under the mascot of their house. Harry arrived where the prefects and the other first years were standing, and he was immediately showered with congratulations. "Hey, I am Jake Taylor and I am the 7th year prefect. If you need some help, then you can always ask me." One of the 7th year prefects introduced himself with a cheerful grin on his face. "Jake." Jake's counterpart swatted him on the arm as she scowled at him. "You can have this conversation with him in the common room. Now, shut up. Professor Ridge is glaring at us," the female prefect whispered furiously while glaring at Jake, who could only scratch the back of his head sheepishly. When the female prefect was done chastising Jake, she turned around and smiled at Harry before turning back. "Whoa! I have read the stories. Do you really have a flying castle?" A boy standing beside Harry asked with stars in his eyes, but before Harry could answer, a girl standing behind them decided to answer for him. "Those are story books for a reason, all of them are made up. Do you really think a 4-year-old could fight a dragon?" the girl asked with a sneer, and the boy's face turned red in embarrassment and anger. "What do you?" The boy was about to start arguing, but Harry decided to interfere as he didn't want to start an argument and ruin his first impression. "She is right. I do not have a flying castle, nor have I ever fought a dragon," Harry interrupted while looking at the boy, making him sputter. The boy simply huffed and looked away, and Harry had no idea how to react to that or why the boy was reacting like that in the first place. "I was half expecting you to go along with the stories. Anyone in your situation would have loved to boast," the girl pointed out, and Harry simply gave her a look. The girl's blonde hair was tied into a ponytail and her brown eyes were covered by a pair of round glasses. "You do not know me, miss, and I do not like boasting," Harry pointed out with an indifferent look on his face. The girl simply pushed up her glass and extended her hand toward Harry. "I am Brittany Lawrence from the House of Lawrence. It's nice to make your acquaintance, Mr. Potter," the girl introduced herself. Harry accepted the offered hand and brushed his lips over the back of her hand, making the girl light up like a Christmas tree. Harry realized that Brittany probably wanted him to shake her hand, not kiss it. Sorry," Harry quickly apologized, but Brittany quickly regained her bearings and shook it off. "I am Harry Potter, you can call me Harry," Harry quickly added. "It's all right, Harry. I simply wasn't expecting you to kiss my hand, and you can call me Brittany," Brittany explained, and the boy standing beside them simply scowled at the two of them. Harry noticed the looks he was giving him and Brittany, and he could already guess that the boy was going to be a huge annoyance. Though Harry simply couldn't understand why the boy was acting like this. At first, the boy was acting like a fanboy, and now he was glaring at him. Was the boy angry at him for breaking his delusions? Maybe. Harry simply decided to ignore the boy for the time being and watch the sorting. After some time, the sorting was finally over, as all the first years have been sorted. Now that the sorting was finally over, everyone on the circular balcony started to leave and the house heads started to approach their respective prefects and first years. I am Professor Stuart Ridge, and I am the head of Horned Serpent House. I am also going to be your history professor. You can refer to me as Sir or Professor, I don't mind either. There are some house rules and the prefects will tell you about the rules after returning to the common room. The head of the Horned Serpent House introduced himself, and from the looks of it, the man was somewhere between his 20s and 30s. Now, all of you will be receiving your wands. As wands are extremely personal to a witch or a wizard, only the wand crafter, Violetta Bovias, will present with you. Now, please follow me. Stuart said as he started to lead the whole group toward the dining hall. Jacqueline had told him where he will be getting his wand, so he already knew where Stuart was leading them. The other house heads were also doing the same. You will be called according to your names, so the rest of you must wait patiently. I will be most unhappy if any of you create a scene, Stuart warned as the whole group arrived in front of a classroom. The door was closed, so nobody knew what was going on inside the room. As soon as other house heads arrived with their own first years, Thomas once again stepped forward and started calling out names. Harry simply decided to wait patiently as there was nothing better to do. I am quite impressed with their system, even though I don't like their system of having a wand permit, Lily grumbled inside his mind. It won't matter if I have a permit or not when I become the strongest, Harry argued back, and Lily started to giggle in agreement. True, true. Though you look quite good in that uniform, Lily agreed as she decided to add a comment about his uniform. Harry looked down at his uniform and couldn't help but smile. He liked his uniform too. The robes were blue and cranberry, in honor of Isolde and James. The blue because Isolde loved the color and she also wanted to be a Ravenclaw as a child, and cranberry was in honor of James for his love of cranberry pies. The robes were fastened by a golden Gordian knot, to respect the brooch Isolde found at the ruins of the original Ilvermorny cottage. Image here. Potter Harry. Thomas finally called Harry's name, and due to that, Harry was finally broken out of his musings. After taking a deep breath, Harry made his way toward the door. The door was still open as the last student walked out of the room, and Harry could see stacks of small boxes inside the room. Harry entered the room and the door closed behind him. Welcome, Hadrian Potter. To be honest, I was extremely surprised when I heard you will be attending Ilvermorny. A frail-looking old woman came into view and Harry's eyes grew wide in surprise after hearing her words. Chapter 28, The Wand Most Perfect. Welcome, Hadrian Potter. To be honest, I was extremely surprised when I heard you will be attending Ilvermorny. A frail-looking old woman came into view and Harry's eyes grew wide in surprise after hearing her words. In fact, Harry was not only surprised, he was shocked to his very core. How? How does she know my name? I never revealed my name to anyone. Questions rushed inside Harry's mind and Harry clamped down on his mental barriers as tightly as possible. No, she isn't using legilimency. I would have sensed her and you would have felt her too, Lily pointed out grimly, which made Harry feel even more worried about the frail-looking woman standing right in front of him. Even though Harry wanted to ask the woman how she knew his name, he decided not to question her. From the looks of it, the woman was someone extremely old and Harry wasn't going to try and play games with her as there was a good chance that we might end up losing the game. I was thinking you will ask questions, but you didn't. Curious. Curious, the woman mumbled as she fiddled her fingers in front of her face while intently staring at Harry. There was an odd glint in her eyes, which was making Harry feel uneasy, but he refused to show any outward reaction. That is the same glint I have seen in Garrick Ollivanders' eyes. I think she is using some sort of magic to inspect you. I always wondered how Garrick recognized me with just a look, even though I never met him before, Lily warned Harry as old memories started to resurface in Lily's mind. Harry tensed up even more after hearing her words as he didn't want anyone to discover his mom's existence. I wonder how Garrick is going to react when I tell him about how I matched you with one of my finest creations, the old woman muttered to herself as she giggled creepily. Several chills ran down Harry's spine. Fear not, fear not. I won't hurt you, Hadrian Potter. Though I think we have wasted enough time and I have a feeling that you are going to be a difficult one. Yes. Yes. A very difficult one, indeed. The woman continued to mutter to herself as she continued to giggle creepily. Harry had no idea how he was supposed to react, so he decided to keep his mouth shut. Yes, I was right. Wand makes are creepy, Lily grumbled as she shivered inside Harry's mind. Son, it will be over, soon. At least, I hope it will, Lily added in an unsure tone. Even after hearing Lily's words, Harry didn't feel much assured. In fact, he was feeling kind of the opposite. Now dearie, tell me, which is your favorite arm? The woman asked as she stepped forward and took out a measuring tape from one of her pockets. I am a righty, Harry answered in a monotone as he revealed his hand to the woman. The woman started to take the measurements of his hands and once again she started to giggle creepily, sending chills down Harry's spine. As a matter of fact, Harry wasn't scared of the woman, but instead, he was feeling creeped out. All done. I think I do know what will suit you, the woman said as she started to rummage through the small boxes. She completely ignored the stacks she ended up toppling while looking for his wand. After a few seconds, she finally grabbed a black box and cheered. She opened the box and offered it to Harry. 12 Holly with a dragon heartstring. Harry stared at the wand in complete awe. He felt some sort of connection with the wand even though he didn't have the wand in his hand, so Harry reached out to the wand and as soon as he touched the wand, he felt good, but at the same time, he felt like something was missing. No, no. I don't think that's it. The old woman shook her head as she closed the box and tossed it aside without any care. The woman once again started to rummage through the stacks and grabbed a green box. She opened the box and offered it to Harry. 11 1/2 cherry with a phoenix feather, the woman said, but this time, Harry didn't feel any sort of connection with the wand, and as soon as he touched the wand, he pulled back his hand, looking like the wand zapped him. Not this one too. The woman shook her head in disappointment, but at the same time, she was feeling extremely excited. She had a really good feeling that matching Hadrian Potter with a wand is going to be a challenge and she was always up to a challenge even though she was nearly 147 years old. The woman continued to offer him wands, but none of them were a match for him, which clearly seemed to make the woman frustrated and excited at the same time. 13 1/3 willow with unicorn tail hair, the woman said as she offered another wand. Harry grabbed the wand and felt his magic sing. Harry stared at the wand in awe and gave it a twirl and he immediately felt something off about the wand even though sparks flew out of his wand. I almost thought that was it, but I think willow is the wood you will need, the woman tapped her chin as she snatched the wand from Harry. He looked a bit miffed about losing the wand, but at the same time, he didn't mind as it wasn't a perfect match. He didn't know why his emotions were so conflicting, but Lily decided to chip in and explain the reason behind his conflicting emotions. My wand was 10 1/4 willow with unicorn tail hair. Maybe that wand was reacting to me, Lily explained in a thoughtful tone. I see, Harry mumbled inside his mind as he finally understood why he was feeling so conflicted. Once again, the woman returned, but this time with a white box in her hand. The woman opened the box to reveal a spindly-looking bone-white wand to Harry. 13 1/2 willow with horn serpent horn as the core, the woman revealed in a dramatic fashion, and even though Harry was yet to touch the wand, he could feel that this was it. He has finally found a match. Harry slowly reached out to the wand and grabbed it and he immediately felt his magic sing as power coursed through his body. Harry decided to give it a twirl and sparks flew out of the tip of his wand, and this time the sparks were much bigger and brighter. Harry stared at the wand in complete awe. The wand felt like a part of his body he had been missing all this time. Quite fitting, I would say, the woman said as she pointed at Harry's emblem before she started to giggle creepily. Even though Harry was still creeped out, he decided to thank the woman. He finally found the missing part that he didn't even know he was missing in the first place. Thank you, Harry genuinely thanked the woman as his gaze returned to his wand. Mah. No need to thank this old woman, she is only doing her job. Now, let me get the permit for you, the woman shrugged off dismissively as a parchment floated into her hand from the nearby desk. The woman simply placed her finger and a seal appeared on the parchment. Keep this on yourself if you don't want to get in trouble, the woman shoved the parchment into Harry's hand with a clear hint of distaste in her voice. Though it was easy for Harry to realize that the woman's ire wasn't directed at him. In fact, it was directed at the parchment she shoved into his hands. Harry could feel that there was a story, but he decided not to pry as it wasn't his place, but there was still something he needed to ask before leaving. Do you have wand holsters? Harry asked as he rolled the parchment before putting it away in one of his pockets. Of course, but it will cost you extra as your tuition only covers the cost of your wand, the woman revealed, and Harry simply told her that he will pay for the wand holster separately. The witch pulled out her wand and flicked it in the air, summoning a wand holster from the back of the room. That would be 2 galleons, dearie, the woman said as she handed the holster to Harry. Harry nodded his head and paid her the gold as he placed the holster around his right forearm. Thank you. Thanking her again, Harry started to leave after placing his newly acquired wand inside the wand holster, but he stopped when the woman spoke up from behind. I will be looking forward to your achievements, Hadrian Potter, and if you ever need my assistance in regards to your wand, you are always welcome to pay me a visit, the woman said before she started to giggle creepily. Maybe, I will take you on that offer someday, Violetta Beauvais, Harry muttered internally as he opened the door and started to leave. Yes. Yes. I am sure that the upcoming years are going to be quite interesting. I will love to rub the fact that it was me who matched him with his wand on Garrick's face. I am sure, he will be quite displeased, Violetta Beauvais mused internally, and she once again started to giggle creepily. Chapter 29, Welcome to Ilvermorny, So, what do you think, Potter? Is our school better than Hogwarts? Jake asked as he slumped down beside Harry in the dining hall. Unlike Hogwarts, the dining hall in Ilvermorny was just that, a dining hall. If the headmaster or any other staff members needed to make an announcement, then all the students were asked to gather at the entrance hall, and the announcement was done from the circular balcony from the floor above. Harry turned his head to give the 7th-year prefect a look, and he realized that Jake was genuinely curious. At first, Harry thought that Jake was probably trying to make fun of him, but he was wrong, or Jake was a really good actor. The Great Hall is much better than this dining hall. The roof of the Great Hall is enchanted to look like real sky, Lily huffed inside Harry's mind haughtily, but Harry simply decided to ignore her. I haven't been to Hogwarts, so I don't know, but I have heard stories that the roof of the Great Hall is enchanted to look like the real sky, Harry revealed with a small smile marring his face, and Jake's eyes started to shine as excitement. Cool! Jake exclaimed, looking really excited. What else can you tell me about Hogwarts? Jake asked, only to receive a shrug from Harry. Sorry. I don't know much as I haven't been there. I have only heard some stories, and from what I can tell, classes are better here and Ilvermorny has more subjects too, Harry explained with an apologetic look on his face, and even though Jake was a bit disappointed, he still nodded his head in understanding. Oh, well. It's all right, I guess. Anyways, welcome to Ilvermorny, and if you need any help, then you are always welcome, Jake said as he raised his fist toward Harry. Noticing the confused look on Harry's face, Jake simply urged Harry to raise his own fist. Harry gave him a look before raising his fist, and Jake bumped his fist with Harry. This is how you fist bump, Potter. Get used to this or everyone will think you are a country bumpkin. Jake laughed as he stood up and walked away. Harry didn't know what to say, but from what he has seen, Jake Taylor was all right in his books. Whoa! That was Jake Taylor. Do you know him? The same boy, who was glaring at Harry after Harry broke his stupid delusions, gushed out excitedly. Harry was thinking that he was able to get rid of the boy, but here he was, back to his initial obnoxious self. Harry opened his mouth to give the boy a scathing reply as he wanted nothing from the boy, but he was cut off when the boy continued to speak. Of course, you know him. After all, you are the boy who lived and he is the Quidditch captain of our house, so it is obvious that you know him, the boy gushed out excitedly like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I don't know what you think you know about me, but I didn't even know him until today, and just for the record, I don't like Quidditch, Harry retorted in a monotone, barely holding himself back from snapping at the obnoxious boy. Harry didn't understand how or why, but the boy clearly had some ulterior motives. He would have blamed the boy's parents, but nobody besides Carlson or the staff knew that he would be attending Ilvermorny instead of Hogwarts, so it was quite unlikely that the boy's parents put him up to it. Harry was completely fine with the boy glaring at him from afar, even though he knew that the boy was going to be a huge annoyance. Unfortunately for Harry, after he returned to the group after receiving his wand, the boy was back to his usual obnoxious self. The boy was so obnoxious that he was yet to introduce himself, and it was common courtesy to introduce yourself even in the Muggle world. The boy gasped loudly after hearing Harry's words. No, you can't. You are not Harry Potter. You can't be Harry Potter. Harry Potter cannot hate something as epic as Quidditch. The boy growled in anger as he picked up his plate and walked away. Good riddance, Harry grumbled internally. Even though he was a bit offended and wanted to get rid of the boy in a permanent fashion, he was quite glad that the boy walked away on his own, or Harry might have lost his patience and stabbed the boy with the butter knife or the fork. I hope he never returns. Don't worry, son. I also never loved Quidditch, and I never understood why everyone is crazy about the silly game, Lily pointed out, making her stand clear when it comes to Quidditch. If you are wondering, that was Owen Curtis from the House of Curtis. He is the most obnoxious boy I have ever met. It would be better if you stayed away from him, and it would do you a lot of good if you don't hurt him, Brittany, who was sitting on the opposite side of the table as she pushed up her glasses. Harry held back a frown as he scrunched his face in confusion. Why? Harry couldn't help but ask. Was the girl trying to protect the boy or was it something else? It was also a good thing that Harry held himself back from hurting the boy. The boy was from a pure-blood house, it would have caused him a lot of problems if he attacked the boy in front of so many witnesses. Harry knew that he didn't have any backing to face a pure-blood house even with Jacqueline Harper helping him out. He is the youngest child of the family and he is quite loved. That is Rigel Curtis, Brittany said as she jerked her chin toward the Wampus house table and Harry's gaze found the fifth-year prefect. Rigel dearly loves his Owen, just like everyone else in their family, and Rigel would make your life extremely difficult even if you are the Harry Potter, Brittany explained, putting more emphasis on the Harry Potter. At least she didn't call him the boy who lived. To be honest, he hated the moniker. It was a reminder of the fact that he lived while his parents died, but he wouldn't mind using the fact to his own advantage though. His mom is still alive, but that's beside the fact. It was simply a matter of principle. I see. Harry muttered as he nodded his head in understanding. They won't care if Owen was at fault or not, they will simply come for you, Brittany said as she once again pushed up her glasses. Thanks, I will be careful, Harry said gratefully as he resumed eating. He was also grateful to all the prefects for keeping him from getting mobbed by students. A lot of students seemed to be quite interested in him and it was really unnerving him. Until he met Norton, he didn't know anything about friendship or companionship, so he was used to being a loner, but now that he was the center of everyone's attention, it was making him uncomfortable. After everyone was finally done with their meals, the fifth-year prefects of Horned Serpent started to lead the first years to the Horned Serpent dorms while the fifth-year prefects of the other houses were also doing the same for their own first years. Wampus dorms were on the 3rd floor, Horned Serpent dorms were on the 4th floor, Thunderbird dorms were on the 5th floor, and finally, Pukwudgie dorms were on the 6th floor. Thank Merlin, they don't have moving stairs. It was a huge pain in the AR, Lily snapped her mouth shut when she finally realized that she was about to curse. Harry simply rolled his eyes. I already know what you were going to say, so it kind of beats the purpose, Harry pointed out in an amused tone. Yes you do, but I am not happy that you know them in the first place, Lily growled in frustration. While Lily did have a hand in his upbringing, she didn't have much of an influence on his upbringing until Harry was 8, so she was unable to stop him from learning stuff from thugs. Harry rarely cursed or swore, but it was simply a matter of principle. It was a huge pain in the back when you were in a hurry, Lily finished the sentence and Harry ended up rolling his eyes for the second time when his mom decided to use back instead of arse. I won't be cursing before you are 14 and I don't want to hear you using any foul words before you turn 14, Lily added unhappily. She knew that she couldn't stop Harry from cursing, so she decided to give him a timeline. Anyone in her place wouldn't have done so, but Lily was no longer a normal mother. The prefects finally led the first years into the Horned Serpent dorms and Harry couldn't help but look around in awe. The common room was massive. There were a lot of desks and chairs for students to sit down and study. The left side of the dorm was completely dedicated to shelves filled with books, but not only that, Harry could see stacks of books lying around everywhere. Den of bookworms indeed, Harry mused inside his mind as a grin formed on his face. The interior of the common room was following the trend of their uniforms. The whole common room was blue with cranberry aesthetics and there was a horned serpent statue right above the fireplace. Several comfy-looking couches were gathered around the fireplace along with some small desks in front of the couches so that students could study even when they were relaxing on the couches. I can get used to this, Harry muttered internally as he started to nod his head with a satisfied grin on his face. Chapter 30, Welcome to Ilvermorny, 2. The next day Harry woke up early and decided to finish his morning rituals before the others woke up and joined him in the communal baths. He was already unhappy with the fact that he has to share a room with the obnoxious fool along with 2 more boys. The other 2 were Muggleborns, so the 2 of them didn't pester him much. That is why he didn't mind the 2 of them as they were all right in his books. The 2 of them were a bit childish, which was to be expected. After finishing all of his rituals, Harry decided to get dressed and look around the common room. According to the prefects, breakfast would be available from 8:30 am, so Harry still had almost 2 hours in his hands to explore. Harry arrived in the common room, only to find it completely empty. For whatever reason, the lamps were still, not that Harry was going to complain. So, without wasting any time, Harry made his way toward the shelves filled with books. Most of the books on the shelves were present in the library, so Harry lost most of his interest, but there were still some books that Harry hasn't seen in the library, but none of the books seemed to be anything dangerous. Harry wasn't expecting to see any of the dangerous books here on the shelves in the first place, but he still felt a bit disappointed. After some consideration, Harry grabbed the second-year defense book and slumped down on one of the couches to relax. Harry opened the book and slowly he got lost in the book. The second-year book consisted of the second half of the second-year Hogwarts curriculum along with the whole third-year curriculum. Harry was already familiar up to the fourth-year Hogwarts curriculum, so he simply browsed through the book in his hand. The book did have spells, which weren't in the Hogwarts curriculum, so he decided to etch them into his mind for the time being. His occlumency wasn't that good, but it was still good enough for him to memorize such elementary spells in a matter of few seconds. It is quite rare to see someone up so early. Harry was brought out of his trance when he heard someone's voice. He looked up from his book to find the fifth-year male prefect standing in front of him. "I am used to getting up early and I also wanted to check out the collection," Harry answered back with a smile as he tapped the book with his fingers. The prefect gave him a nod as his head trailed toward the spine of the book. "Reading in advance? Humph. That's enough proof of why you were sorted into our house. You belong right among us," the boy exclaimed with a grin as he went beside the fireplace and grabbed a book after looking around for a bit from one of the stacks. The prefect smacked the book and blew at it to remove the dust. "Give this a read, whenever you have some time. It will do you a lot of good," the prefect said as he handed over the book to Harry. Harry grabbed the book and took a look at the title. "Our Progress." Harry wanted to ask some questions about the book, but before he could, the boy extended his hand toward Harry. "Osmond Slate," the boy revealed his name even though Harry knew his name as the prefects introduced themselves last night. Harry placed the offered book beside him and accepted the offered hand. "Harry Potter," Harry introduced himself as he shook Osmond's hand. "I gotta go, Potter, and don't get lost in the books. Classes start from today," Osmond said as he walked away toward the entrance of their common room. Osmond arrived in front of the entrance and tapped it with his wand. The door swung open and Osmond walked out of the common room. Harry simply shrugged and went back to his reading. Harry got so lost in his book that he didn't notice how the time passed away until he was finally broken out of his trance. "The school hasn't started yet and you are already reading a book. Why?" Owen whined loudly as he approached Harry and plopped down beside him. Harry couldn't help but wonder how Owen was sorted into Horned Serpent, and that is when he remembered the keyword, usually. So usually, bookworms are sorted into Horned Serpent, which means sometimes, someone like Owen can also get sorted into Horned Serpent. Thankfully, Harry was saved by the arrival of Brittany. "It is almost 8:30. I don't want to be late for breakfast or the classes," Brittany pointed out primly, and Harry nodded his head in understanding as he stood up. Our Progress was a nice read even though he was yet to finish it, but Harry couldn't understand why Osmond decided to hand him a logbook. "Oh, come on. Can you be any less of a teacher's pet?" Owen growled, looking extremely annoyed as he glared at Brittany. "I don't want to be late for breakfast or classes," Owen mocked Brittany, who didn't even bother to look annoyed at Owen. "Listen, Curtis, I am not your friend, nor do I want to be. Can you please stop bothering me and Brittany?" Harry asked nicely as he could when he was kind of annoyed. Owen turned toward Harry and gave him a betrayed look, before huffing. "Fine. I can't do anything if you don't want to be awesome. I simply wanted to help you become an elite, but I guess a fake is a fake," Owen exclaimed with a scowl, gathering everyone's attention who was present in the common room before walking away. Harry simply stared at the boys retreating back with a dumbfounded look on his face. What elite? If he thinks of himself as an elite, then I don't want to become an elite, ever, Harry vowed inside his mind. That is exactly how most of the purebloods acted back in Britain. "I still wonder how I was able to endure them for so long," Lily sighed in regret, but she already knew the answer. She was quite mellow and kind-hearted at that time. If the current herself was there, then would have probably become a dark lady with an agenda of removing every inbred fool from the face of the earth. "I hope that was enough for him to stop bothering you anymore, but I think it is a fool's dream," Brittany sighed as she pushed up her glasses. "I can't help but agree with you," Harry muttered with a grimace. "Okay. Let's go," Harry said as he placed the book on one of the stacks. The two of them made their way out of the common room, and they were followed by some of the other first years along with students of different years. Harry was quite glad that he was left alone for most of the time in his house, or maybe they were simply testing the waters before trying to approach him. Except for Owen, Harry didn't have any problems with any of the other first years even though he didn't know them in the first place. "Which is the class you are looking forward to?" Harry asked while walking beside Brittany. He also noticed that students from other houses were also making their way toward the dining hall in droves. "Charms, and what about you?" Brittany returned the question to Harry. Defense, Harry answered after thinking for a bit. He wondered for a bit if he should answer truthfully or if should he say something random. Ultimately, he decided to go with a half-truth. He was excited about curses, he wasn't interested in the subject as a whole. The two of them arrived in the dining hall, and as soon as the two of them sat down, food appeared in front of them. "What is this dish called?" Harry asked as he picked up the knife and fork. "Red flannel hash," Brittany answered, but didn't bother to give him a detailed explanation. Harry simply shrugged and dived in. After some time, the prefects arrived and started to hand over timetables to everyone. Fifth-year prefects were responsible for handing over timetables to the first year, second year, and third year, while sixth-year prefects were handling the fourth year and the fifth year, and finally, the seventh-year prefects were handling the sixth year and the seventh year. The classes end before lunch every day. Do you want to hit the library after lunch? Harry asked as he took a look at the timetable. Sure, I was also planning the same, Brittany answered with a nod. In fact, she was just like Harry, and she was quite excited about making a friend who was a bookworm just like her. Okay then. Harry nodded his head and placed the timetable inside one of the pockets in his robe. After that, the two of them continued to chat about different classes. Harry also learned that Brittany was quite good at herbology and it was her second favorite subject. After the two of them were done with their food, they decided to head toward the charms classroom even though the class wasn't supposed to start for half an hour. Thankfully, they had maps behind their timetables so the two of them weren't going to get lost, and that is also why they decided to take the scenic route. Chapter 31, The Class is Most Dull. Good morning, students. Welcome to the first year charms class. I am Abigail Clark and all of you will call me ma'am or professor. While I want to start teaching you how to cast spells, there is something all of you should know before you start casting. That is what we will be learning today, but before that, let's deal with the introductions. Abigail clapped her hands with a cheerful smile on her face as she pointed at one of the students sitting at the front. With that, all of the students started to introduce themselves one by one, and when they were finally done, Abigail started to explain the important aspects necessary to cast a spell. Harry simply tuned her off after a few minutes as he was already aware of the facts she was explaining. All 150 students were present in the class, so it was simply impossible for any professor to keep an eye on all of them at the same time. So, Abigail didn't even notice the fact that Harry has long stopped listening to whatever she was saying. In Ilvermorny, students from all four houses shared their classes together. Not only did it make it easier for the professors to teach, but it also made it easier for them to prepare the timetable and give the students a lot of free time to finish their studies and have some fun with their friends. Just like Harry, a lot of students were happy with this arrangement, but unlike Harry, they weren't reading other books. After an hour, the class finally came to an end, and all the students started to leave as they needed to make their way to the Defense Against Dark Arts class, which was going to start in 10 minutes. So, you are reading in advance? Brittany asked while walking beside Harry. Harry smiled sheepishly and nodded his head. Yeah. I was kind of excited and I finished the first year books as quickly as I could, Harry explained, and Brittany hummed before nodding her head. Think you can help me? Brittany requested, looking a bit uncomfortable. Harry simply smiled after hearing her request and nodded his head. Sure, I will help you out. Simply tell me where you are having problems and I will explain it to you, Harry answered with a smile. Thank you, Brittany thanked Harry with a grateful smile marring her face. The duo along with the other first years finally arrived at the Defense Against Dark Arts classroom. Harry and Brittany decided to sit at the back as Brittany didn't have a preference, and Harry decided to sit at the back so that he could avoid the eyes of the professor. Brittany also followed Harry's example and started to read in advance, but unlike Harry, she wasn't reading a second-year book. She was simply reading the first-year Transfiguration book in advance. Harry also met with Danny before the charms class, but they didn't get to talk much, and Danny also seemed to have made friends with his housemates. Though Harry was quite grateful that students weren't trying to mob him. Yes, he was getting looks from a lot of his classmates, but all of them were yet to approach him. Harry was glad that he could study in peace. The rest of the class quickly filled up as the other students also started to trickle inside the class. Owen gave him a glare before he went to sit with some of his other housemates, but what Owen didn't know was the fact that Harry didn't even register him as he was busy reading his book. After some time, the teacher finally arrived and closed the door to garner everyone's attention. Welcome to the first year of Defense Against Dark Arts class. My name is Desmond Price and all of you will refer to me as Sir or Professor. Now before we start, let's get over with the introductions. You. The man started speaking with a stern look on his face and pointed at the girl sitting at the corner of the front table. Start, the man added, and the girl immediately stood up and introduced herself. With that, everything was put into motion. One by one all the students started to introduce themselves, and when they were finally done, just like Abigail, Desmond started to explain some theories. Harry had to admit, the teaching method in Ilvermorny was much better than Hogwarts. According to his mom, at Hogwarts, the professors will start teaching casting from day one without explaining how spells work. Pureblood students probably already how to cast spells, as it wasn't uncommon for pureblood parents to teach magic before they turn 11, but Muggleborn students were left to fend for themselves. His mom also faced the same problem. She didn't have anyone to help her and she had to learn everything the hard way. Now, Harry was quite glad that Mom told him to read the elements of magic, or he wouldn't have been able to make progress so quickly. Once again Harry tuned off Desmond after a few minutes and started to read on his own. Even Desmond failed to notice the fact that Harry has long stopped paying any attention to whatever he was saying, even though Desmond seemed to be much sharper than Abigail. Brittany also followed his example and continued to study on her own. Hadrian, you need to find a place to practice your casting, or it won't matter how much you read or memorize, Lily pointed out bitterly, and Harry simply sighed as he ran his fingers through his hair. I know. Today is the first day of school, Mom. I will see what I can do, Harry replied tiredly. Lily simply hummed in agreement, and that was the end of their short discussion. The rest of the class passed normally, and by the time the class finally came to an end, Desmond was done with his explanation. The students quickly gathered their things and started to leave in an orderly fashion. Well, as orderly 11 years could be. Their next class was History of Magic, so after leaving the class, all the students started to make their way toward the History of Magic. Once again, they had 10 minutes to make their way to the History of Magic class, which was more than enough for everyone. Harry and Brittany arrived at the History of Magic class, but this time, they didn't take the scenic route. The two of them entered the class and made their way toward the back. When they were finally seated, Brittany decided to ask Harry some questions she wasn't able to understand. The answer is visualization. You must visualize what you are trying to achieve, or no matter how strong your intent is, the spell wouldn't work, Harry explained softly, but he took a small pause to see how she was reacting. Watching her nod, Harry decided to continue his explanation. Now, as for your question. Visualization means you need to be able to picture the end result in your mind, and your intent represents your desire to achieve the said result. Do you understand what I am trying to say? Harry asked while staring at Brittany. The bespectacled girl bit her lip as she contemplated his words. For example, if I am trying to turn a feather into a needle, then I would need to picture the needle I want inside my mind. This is visualization, right? Brittany asked, only to receive a nod from Harry. Okay, I understand. Brittany nodded her head in understanding. Then the intent is my desire to transform the feather into my visualized needle. Brittany asked, only to receive a small smile from Harry as he nodded his head. Harry wasn't averse to helping someone who would ask him nicely, and Brittany asked him nicely. Not only that, Brittany was the only one he was talking to, and she is from a pureblood family. Harry has done his research on the pureblood families with Norton's help, and he knew that the House of Lawrence wasn't as powerful or rich as the Harpers, but it was still better to have a favorable relationship with the eldest daughter of the family, especially when he didn't have anything to lose. Thank you for explaining. This question has been bugging me for quite some time, Brittany thanked Harry with a grateful look on her face. It's all right. You can always help me with herbology, as I am not a fan of the said subject, Harry replied with a smile, only to receive a nod in agreement. The teacher finally arrived in the class and all discussion ceased. Good morning. My name is Stuart Ridge, and I welcome you all to the first year of the History of Magic class. Before we start, I would like to know all of your names. Stuart said, and he pointed at the boy sitting at the corner of the front desk. The boy stood up and introduced himself. When the introductions were finally over, Stuart told everyone to open their history books so that he could start teaching them how MCU was formed. That was the first chapter in their curriculum, and for the first time, instead of doing his own thing, Harry decided to pay attention to the class. Chapter 32, The Room They Loved. After attending the herbology class, which was the last class of their day, Harry along with most of the other first years arrived at the dining hall for lunch. Some of the first years decided to take a shower before eating, as they had to handle plants and dirt in the herbology class. Even though Harry didn't have to do much in class and he was completely fine with his given task, he wasn't a fan of the class as a whole. Maybe, it had something to do with the fact that he was forced by Petunia to manage the garden and he hated every moment of it. He also hated the fact that Petunia would show off the garden to everyone and revel in the praises while he was the one who had to manage the garden. "Heya, Harry." Harry heard a cheerful voice from behind and he turned around only to find Jacqueline standing behind him with a food tray in her hands. "Hi, Jacqueline." Harry greeted her back with a smile and gestured her to take a seat beside him. "So, you are the head girl, not surprising, I guess." Harry added with a smile as he pointed at her head girl badge. "Yeah, that is why I wasn't able to greet you yesterday, I had a lot of duties." Jacqueline sighed as she sat down and placed the food tray on the table. "It's all right, Jacqueline. I didn't have any problems. Everyone is quite nice and helpful," Harry assured her with a smile on his face, and after hearing his words, a mischievous grin appeared on her face. "I see. Then you must be having a lot of fun. I mean, you are already a celebrity," Jacqueline said mischievously, her eyes shining with a mischievous glint only to receive a dirty look from Harry after he groaned in frustration. Jacqueline was quite well known around the school too, so she could easily guess how Harry was probably feeling. Sometimes, she felt like an exotic animal while walking around the school with everyone whispering about her as she walked by, and Harry was someone who made even Quidditch stars look like peasants, so she could sympathize with him even though her popularity wasn't anywhere close to Harry's. "So, who is your friend?" Jacqueline asked, changing the topic. Only now did she notice the wide-eyed girl, staring at her. Harry turned around to look at Brittany, who was still staring at Jacqueline wide-eyed. He didn't know Jacqueline was someone famous, but from his classmates' reaction, Jacqueline seemed to be quite famous. He looked around the table only to notice a lot of girls along with boys staring at them. He internally groaned. Now, his curiosity was piqued and he wanted to know why Jacqueline was so well known. He poked Brittany at the side to bring her out of her stupefied state. The girl blinked in confusion as she turned toward Harry, and soon as she realized her blunder, she started to blush furiously. Harry would have to admit that right now, Brittany was looking kind of cute. Sorry, I was so excited to finally meet you. I am Brittany Lawrence, by the way, it's an honor to finally meet you." Brittany fumbled with her words as she introduced herself, and she ended up becoming even more embarrassed by the time she finished speaking. "Wow! I don't know what to say." "It's nice to meet you too, Miss Lawrence," Jacqueline said, looking amused. "Though I don't think I have anything impressive to be hailed as such," Jacqueline added, and Brittany immediately shook her head. "Don't say that. You have done enough. You have won the Under-13 Dueling Championship, then you also won the Under-15 Dueling Championship, and you have also qualified to represent our country in the Under-17 Dueling Championship. You are the idol of a lot of girls who want to make a name for themselves," Brittany gushed out excitedly. Jacqueline stared at the younger girl and whistled with an impressed look on her face. "You know your stuff, I have to admit that, but as I said, I haven't done anything impressive with my life yet," Jacqueline said with a smile, and when she noticed that the younger girl was going to protest again, Jacqueline raised her hand to stop her. "I am not someone special for winning the Under-13 Dueling Championship, nor do I feel proud for winning the Under-15 Championship, but if I do win the Under-17 Championship, then I will consider that I have finally achieved something," Jacqueline revealed with a far-off look on her face. "But why? I mean, you still won the Under-13 and the Under-15 Championships, right?" Harry was listening to the duo from the sidelines asked with a confused look on his face. "Yes, but the Under-13 and the Under-15 are national-level tournaments. I want to win the Under-17 tournament, which is an international-level tournament, and the competition is going to be a lot tougher. I barely qualified as the representative of our country," Jacqueline explained, and Harry nodded his head in understanding. His mom didn't know much about dueling tournaments, except for the fact that the Hogwarts Charms professor, Phileas Flitwick, is a dueling champion. Dueling tournaments were never a hype back in Britain, and they still weren't. The wizards and witches in Britain love to remain blissfully unaware of anything happening outside their country. "But still, you must be really good to become the representative of this country," Harry insisted, as he knew that Jacqueline must be quite impressive or she would have failed to become representative for the Under-17 Dueling Championship. Not only that, but she was able to win the Under-13 and Under-15 tournaments. Yes, those two were national-level tournaments, but she still won them, which meant Jacqueline turned out to be the best among her peers. She is really downplaying her achievements. There is a reason why she is quite famous, Brittany added from the side, and Harry simply nodded his head in agreement. Jacqueline huffed as her shoulders slumped down. "Fine. The two of you win. Can we eat now?" Jacqueline asked in an annoyed tone. "Sure, I am feeling quite hungry, Harry agreed, and Brittany simply nodded her head in agreement. So, how are the classes? Jacqueline asked after a few minutes of silence. Students were still staring at their group, but she was used to getting stared at, and while the stares were making Harry really uncomfortable, he was handling it quite nicely. Brittany was the one who was having it worse, as she wasn't used to getting stared at. Nice, but I find them a bit boring as I have been reading in advance, Harry answered after thinking for a bit. Jacqueline was the head girl, so he was wondering if he should tell her the truth or not. Jacqueline nodded her head as she hummed before turning toward Brittany. What about you, Miss Lawrence? Jacqueline asked when she noticed that the younger girl was paying way too much attention to her food. I like them. Brittany answered with a yelp, but before the girl could embarrass herself anymore, Harry decided to cut in. By the way, Jacqueline, do you know a place where I can practice casting? Harry asked, and Jacqueline fiddled with her knife and fork for a moment before turning toward Harry. I have my personal training room, you are free to use it. The room is pretty big and it is big enough for the two of us to practice casting. Miss Lawrence, you are also welcome, if you want, Jacqueline answered while intently staring at Harry and Brittany. Though the room might be unavailable here and now, Jacqueline added thoughtfully. Harry internally cheered. He would have preferred if he had his own personal room, but it was simply impossible for him to have a training room for himself, so this was the best he could have asked for. Thank you. This means a lot to me, Harry thanked Jacqueline with a grateful look on his face. Thank you, Miss Harper, and I promise I won't misuse the room or disrespect your generosity, Brittany thanked Jacqueline as she respectfully bowed her head. Even though she never voiced her concerns, she was also wondering where she was going to practice her casting. Casting spells in the hallways wasn't allowed, and you could practice spells in the common room, but it wasn't an appropriate place to practice casting. Jacqueline looked at the two first years nervously. She wasn't expecting the two of them to be so thankful, as she didn't think that it was a huge deal. Truth be told, she had 3 rooms to herself. 2 training rooms and 1 ritual room. One of the training rooms was left mostly unoccupied, as it was impossible for her to be at 2 places at the same time. She could use a time turner, but unfortunately, she had never seen a time turner with her own eyes. She could have allowed the 2 of them to use the room indefinitely, but she still decided to make it clear that there might be an instance when she would need to kick the 2 of them out of the room. Guys, it's no big deal, Jacqueline waved off dismissively. The 2 of you don't have any classes in the afternoon, right? Jacqueline asked, and after getting a nod from the 2 first years, she decided to continue. Then I will show you the room after lunch, Jacqueline finished as she resumed eating. After the 3 of them finished eating, Jacqueline led the duo to the 7th floor. The trio finally stopped in front of a metal door, and after Jacqueline provided the password, the door opened with a loud clang. The 3 of them walked in, and Jacqueline turned around to watch Harry's and Brittany's reactions, and she wasn't disappointed in the slightest. Harry's mouth was hanging open due to the sheer size of the room. The room was massive. Brittany was also experiencing something similar, as she was left gobsmacked too. So, what do you guys think? Jacqueline asked smugly. I think I will come to love this place, Harry mumbled inside his mind, and Lily seemed to completely agree with him, even though she didn't bother to voice her thoughts. Chapter 33, Plans That Failed. Headmaster's Office, Hogwarts. Albus Dumbledore took a sip from the glass and a grimace appeared on his face. It has been nearly a decade since he reached out to his liquor cabinet, but today was one of those days. Even though the liquid felt sour and bitter, he couldn't bring himself to care. He finally found Harry, or it was more like Harry finally deemed it fit to reveal himself to the rest of the world, but it was simply too late to fix anything. So many plans, but all of them were useless now. Harry was only 11 years old, but he was already a murderer. Albus shook his head in disappointment when he remembered that Harry was also responsible for killing Dudley, who was only a child. Albus released another sigh as he took another sip from the glass. Now that Harry decided to run off to another country, he no longer has any control over what Harry was supposed to learn. The boy could already be learning dark arts for all he knew. Unlike in Britain, rituals were completely legal in America. Albus has been trying to get rituals banned all around the world, but he hasn't been successful in that regard. Not surprising, since a lot of people use rituals to reach newer heights. He knew he could try to get Harry under his thumb, or at least, he could try to bring the boy back to Britain, but that would lead to a confrontation with the boy. Albus wanted to avoid that at any cost. There was no way he could get the boy back to Britain without raising questions. Questions he wanted to avoid at all costs. Right now, Jacqueline Harper, a 17-year-old girl has been named as Harry's guardian, and as soon as Albus tried to contest her claims, uncomfortable questions will be asked. Questions like: why has he never bothered to meet Harry all these years? Why was the will of Potters never read? Why was Harry given to a Muggle family? The Dursleys were dead, but it will cause a huge ruckus if the truth was revealed. He could have dealt with the whole matter easily if he would have to contest the girl's claims within the shores of Britain. Unfortunately for Albus, Jacqueline Harper is a resident of America, and since she has been named as Harry's guardian, so by extension, Harry has become a resident of America too. So, if he tried to contest the girl's claim, then the case would be heard at the ICW headquarters. Albus might be the supreme mugwump of ICW, but he wasn't that well liked among the international wizarding community, so it was highly unlikely that he would win the case. Some people will simply vote against him just to spite him. He was also quite aware of the fact that Carlson Kent, the headmaster of Ilvermorny, hated him. The man will fight tooth and nail to keep Harry in his school. Albus could try to get Harry back by claiming that Ilvermorny wasn't fit for the boy, but once again, it would open a can of worms he didn't want to deal with. There was no way of getting Harry back without causing a huge ruckus. So, he could only leave Harry where he was for the time being. Everything was spiraling out of his control, and Albus hated not being in control. Once again Albus started to wonder if he made the wrong choice by placing Harry at the Dursleys or not. After all, that is where everything started to go wrong. Minerva McGonagall was staring out of the window with a solemn look on her face. Harry Potter decided not to attend Hogwarts. Instead, the boy decided to attend a foreign school. She may not be well connected as Albus, but she was quite well known among her fellow educators. So, it wasn't extremely difficult for her to find out that Harry Potter decided to attend Ilvermorny. Minerva has come to know that Harry didn't have a good childhood, and maybe that is why the boy decided to leave their country, but she still couldn't understand why Harry would leave the country. Did the boy know who left him at the Dursleys? But it was simply impossible, right? After all, they never met the Dursleys, so nobody probably knew who left him at the Dursleys. That wasn't the only problem. There was something going on with Albus. She knew Albus had his reasons for placing the boy at the Dursleys, but she simply didn't know why. Did the boy leave the country to avoid Albus? Probably. Most likely. Though it was simply an undeniable fact that she failed the boy. Not only that, but she also failed the boy's parents. James and Lily were two of her favorite students and she failed them. Minerva didn't have any excuses for her failure. A lone tear trickled down her eye as she continued to stare outside the window. She would have liked to have a drink, it would have helped her to remain calm, but even the thought of having a drink soured her mind. Unknown location. Alastor Moody took a large swig from his hip flask and burst out laughing. Harry Potter, such an enigma. Alastor would have gone to congratulate the boy if the boy wasn't a murderer. Even though the boy was a murderer, Alastor couldn't deny that the boy was quite cunning. Alastor didn't know much about politics, but he knew quite well that there was no way Albus to get the boy. At least, not without raising some really uncomfortable questions. Alastor would have loved to train the boy. He started to wonder what James and Lily would think if they could see their boy right now. He didn't blame the boy. At least not completely. He would have also killed the Dursleys if he was in Harry's shoes. Maybe he would have spared their boy, but he would have still killed the adult Dursleys. Now that Albus' plans have gone down the drain, Alastor started to wonder what the man was going to do next. Alastor couldn't wait to see the man fail again. He took another sip from his hip flask and burst out laughing. Season I, ends. Chapter 34, The Boy Who Improved, I. Time skip, 10 months. It has been 10 months since September 1st and Harry was finally leaving Ilvermorny after finishing his first year of magical education. A lot has happened during these 10 months. He was about to start reminiscing, but he was brought out of his musings when someone spoke up beside him. "Do you have any plans for the holiday, Harry?" Brittany asked curiously as she closed the book in her hand. Brittany decided to sit beside Harry and accompany him during the bus ride. Her house wasn't anywhere close to the Alley of Druids, but her dad was supposed to pick her up from the Alley of Druids, so it wasn't going to be a problem even if she accompanied him. I will probably go on a trip. Maybe a camping trip. Harry guessed with a contemplative look on his face. He did have some plans in his mind, but nothing concrete. "Don't forget to visit me. You promised, you remember, right?" Brittany asked as she narrowed her eyes at Harry, who simply chuckled at her glare. "I haven't forgotten my promise." I will visit you in August as I need to visit Jacqueline before I visit you, Harry reminded the bespectacled girl, who nodded her head stiffly after a few seconds. Good, Brittany said stiffly as she turned to look outside the window. Harry also released a sigh before he leaned back in his seat. He closed his eyes and started to reminiscence the past 10 months. Reminiscing starts. Harry finished the set of 3 rituals during the Christmas break. Almost all the students have gone back to their homes to celebrate Christmas with their families, but Harry decided to stay at school so that he could finish the set of 3 rituals without anyone discovering anything. After finishing the set, his magical power surged. His gaseous magical core finally transformed into liquid magical core, and with that, his magical might increased several folds, but there was still a lot he desired. He might have grown stronger, but he didn't have any real-life experience. Jacqueline had tried her best to make him accompany her for Christmas, but Harry didn't budge, and he also pointed out that he didn't want to impose on her family during Christmas as it was a family event. Jacqueline was saddened, but she decided to respect Harry's choice, but he had to promise to visit her during the summer holidays. She wanted him to get to know her family so that he could join her family next year during Christmas without feeling uncomfortable. Brittany was also the same in that regard. She also wanted him to visit her during the summer holidays so that Harry could join her family for Christmas the year after the next year, since Jacqueline called dibs for next year before she could. To be honest, Harry didn't know what to think about the two of them. Jacqueline, he could understand as she wanted to help him from the beginning, so he could understand that she finally became someone close to him, but he was kind of surprised with how quickly Brittany was able to get close to him. Harry had other friends too, but they were acquaintances at best. There was no way that he would put himself at risk for any of them, but it was completely different for Jacqueline or Brittany. Harry could clearly see himself risking his person for Jacqueline or Brittany. Harry was already planning to reveal his real name to the two of them next year. Quite surprising, Harry knew, but it is what it is. Harry was never a social person. After his terrible childhood, even Harry himself would have been surprised if he turned out to be a social person, but publicly, he still acted cordially with everyone, except for Owen and his merry band. Owen was already a huge pain in the arse, so Harry wanted to avoid creating another annoyance like Owen at any cost. Owen has been trying to get him into trouble, but Harry had already created a good image for himself, so Owen always failed to get Harry into trouble with the professors. Thankfully, Rigel didn't try to get involved or Harry would have to take some measures. While Harry wanted to avoid troubles at any cost, he wasn't going to take any shite from anyone lying down. That is why he had asked Norton to spy on the Curtis family. With the dirt he collected on the Curtis family, it wouldn't be hard to defang them if they ever came after him. On the other hand, Harry also finished learning the 5th-year course, so the classes were mostly boring to him. Neither Brittany nor Jacqueline understood why Harry was pushing himself like this, but neither of them tried to stop him. Instead, they supported him, which Harry was quite grateful for. From the next year, Harry was planning to gain real-life experience when it came to magical combat, though he started to wonder how he was going to achieve that, especially when Jacqueline finished her last year. Jacqueline would have happily agreed to help him even though she would have wiped the floor with him. He had seen her action and she was simply phenomenal. The first time he saw her practicing for the Under-17 tournament, he was completely blown away by her speed and power. Even his mom ended up admitting that she wasn't anywhere close to Jacqueline's level before she died. After hearing his mom's words, Harry was sure that Jacqueline will win the tournament, but he was left completely gobsmacked when Jacqueline lost in the semi-finals. That is when Harry realized that the world is really big, and if he wanted to face either Albus Dumbledore or Voldemort, then he still needed to work a lot. Reminiscing ends. Maybe he could participate in the Under-13 tournament to see where he stood. Yes, it was only going to be a national-level tournament, but he will know where he stood among his peers. Yes, he will be giving away a lot of information to his enemies, but winning the Under-13 tournament wouldn't mean much in the long run. That is a good idea. The reason we lost so many people in the war because none of us knew how to fight. James and Sirius only survived due to their aura training, Lily pointed out, and Harry simply hummed as he opened his eyes. It's also a good excuse to get Jacqueline to train me, Harry pointed out thoughtfully, and Lily couldn't help but agree. I think we were simply fighting a fool's war. We didn't even know how to fight. Now, that I think about it, we never had a chance. Once Voldemort faced 20 Aurors and he walked away after killing all of them, Lily said grimly as she shook her head. In the last 10 months, their connection has become a lot stronger and now they can easily feel each other's gestures. Harry's occlumency shields have also improved a lot in the last 10 months. He didn't have any way to test his shields, but he could feel that they were a lot stronger. After performing the ritual for his mind, the speed of his progress also increased, and it was the same with his body and magic. Now, his body could react much faster, and he could also learn spells a lot quicker. I need to prepare another set of 3 rituals, Harry mused internally, and Lily seemed to agree with him, but not completely. Why not a set of 7? I think the set of 7 will give you better results, Lily explained thoughtfully. Yes, a set of 7 rituals is bound to give me better results, but getting the ingredients will be quite hard. Harry couldn't help but feel a bit wary about initiating a set of 7 rituals. There are quite a few types of rituals. The most notable variants are individual rituals, advanced rituals, sacrificial rituals, and finally set of rituals. Individual rituals are where a person performs a single ritual to gain something specific. Advanced rituals are a 3-part ritual to gain a specific combination of skills. Sacrificial ritual is kind of self-explanatory. It is where a person sacrifices something to gain something. The sacrifices can range from a simple cat to a virgin girl. And finally, a set of rituals. A set of rituals will give the best results, but that is why they are difficult, and you can't stop if you initiate a set without suffering terrible consequences. That is why Harry was quite worried about initiating a set of 7 rituals. After all, he couldn't stop unless he wanted to suffer terrible consequences. You can always ask Jacqueline for some help. I know she won't deny, and from what I know of her, she isn't going to ask questions, Lily pointed out, and after a few seconds of silence, Harry decided to agree with her. Good. I remember a ritual I saw in one of the advanced books, Lily said as she decided to send the knowledge of the ritual straight to Harry's mind. Harry started to rub his chin as the knowledge appeared inside his mind. He had to admit, if he finished the set, then he will receive a massive boost. 1. A ritual to enhance his mind. 2. A ritual to enhance his physique. 3. A ritual to enhance his desire. 4. A ritual to enhance his magical senses. 5. A ritual to enhance his magical control. 6. A ritual to enhance his magical power. 7. A ritual to enhance his magical reserves. First, I will need to write down the ingredients before trying anything, Harry decided internally as he made a point inside his mind to do more research before trying anything. Chapter 35, The Boy Who Improved, 2. After returning to his apartment, Harry started to research the ritual his mom told him about. From the knowledge his mom provided, he knew what the ritual entailed, and he could also recall his own memory of when he browsed the Advanced Rituals book. So, it took Harry only somewhere around 7 hours to finish his research. 7 hours might seem quite a lot, but there have been instances when people have spent not only days but months to finish their research. After all, even the smallest mistake could lead to terrible consequences. Now that Harry was done with his research, he decided to write down the ingredients required for the rituals. 1. The ritual to enhance his mind's Sphinx brain, intact, / Sphinx blood. Harry could have used either an intact Sphinx brain or Sphinx blood for this ritual, but he decided to use Sphinx blood for this ritual. While using an intact Sphinx brain would have given him better results, it was almost impossible for him to acquire an intact Sphinx brain. First of all, intact Sphinx brains aren't sold anywhere except for auction houses, and even if Harry could participate in such an auction, he would need at least 10,000 galleons to start bidding. Intact Sphinx brains are extremely coveted objects, and they are rarely sold even in auctions. Probably only one intact Sphinx brain shows up in a decade, and Harry was already being generous with that. Almost all of the time, Sphinx brains are sold in separate parts, as selling them in parts would make the sellers more gold. Sphinx brains are used in various types of memory-enhancing rituals and potions, but for the ritual Harry was planning to use, Harry could only use Sphinx blood or an intact Sphinx brain. 2. The ritual to enhance his physique, Giant's Heart, Conquered, / Gant's Blood. Once again, Harry found himself in a similar type of conundrum, but once again, his choice was quite obvious. He could either use a conquered giant's heart, which meant that Harry needed to slay the giant on his own, without anyone's assistance, or he could use giant's blood for the ritual. While using a conquered giant's heart would have given him better results, it was simply impossible for him to slay a giant with his current skills. Slaying a giant would have been easier if he could have used the killing curse, but if he used the killing curse, then it would also ruin the magical properties of the giant's body, which as result would make it impossible for Harry to use the heart in the ritual. Then there was another problem too. If Harry ended up using Giant's Heart, then he would need to use intact Sphinx Brain for the previous ritual. As a part of a set, Harry would need to use similarly powered ingredients for each ritual. So, he couldn't use a conquered Giant's Heart for the second ritual if he wasn't using an intact Sphinx Brain for the first ritual. 3. The ritual to enhance his desire Virgin Vela, sacrifice, / Vela blood. Velas are known as creatures of passion and passion could be compared with desire. While desire is associated with achieving happiness, passion is associated with joy. So, somewhat similar. At least, that is what Harry wanted to believe. After all, desire can be also associated with lust and Velas are quite well known for their debauchery. Harry didn't want to turn himself into a male Vela, but as a part of the set, he needed to perform this ritual unless he wanted to suffer terrible consequences. For this ritual, Harry could either sacrifice a virgin Vela, which was kind of impossible since virgin Velas never leave their enclaves and Harry couldn't use anything but a complete Vela for the ritual, or he could Vela blood, which was much easier to acquire than a virgin Vela, and then there was always the matter of the power of the ingredients. So, Harry could only use Vela blood for the third ritual. 4. The ritual to enhance his magical senses Virgin Female, sacrifice, / Neasel, sacrifice, / Neasel blood. There were 3 paths Harry could take for this ritual. Sacrificing a virgin female was not an option as it would mess up the power balance between the other ingredients he was planning to use, and it was also a line Harry wasn't willing to cross for power. Using Neasel blood will be the safest bet for him, but he could also get away with sacrificing a Neasel. So, Harry decided to sacrifice a Neasel for the ritual, instead of using Neasel blood, as sacrificing a Neasel was bound to give him better results. 5. The ritual to enhance his magical control Cerberus heart, conquered, / Cerberus blood. This was a ritual to enhance his control over his own magical power, and while Harry would have loved to use a conquered Cerberus heart, he knew he couldn't. First of all, it would mess up the power balance and there was no way he could kill a Cerberus on his own without using a killing curse, and the killing curse would destroy the magical properties of the Cerberus heart. So, Harry could only use Cerberus blood for the ritual. 6. The ritual to enhance his magical power Dragon heart, conquered, / Dragon heartstring / Dragon blood or Basilisk heart, conquered, / Basilisk venom / Basilisk blood. This ritual will enhance the amount of magic he could use in one go. Usually, a person could only use components from a dragon for this ritual, but due to a special condition, Harry could use basilisk components instead. Harry was Parcelmouth, just like his mom, but he never used this talent because he never needed it. A conquered basilisk heart was off the table as there is only one basilisk reserve in the world and the basilisk reserve is in Greece. There was no way Harry would be able to break into the reserve and hunt a basilisk without alerting anyone. He could use the basilisk blood as it would fit with the rest of his ingredients, but he wanted to use the basilisk venom as it would give him better results and it would also make him immune to almost every venom out there in the world. Getting basilisk venom will be quite difficult, but Harry wasn't going to give up so easily. 7. The ritual to enhance his magical reserves Thunderbird heart, conquered, / Thunderbird wings / Thunderbird blood. A conquered Thunderbird heart was off the table for obvious reasons. Thunderbird blood would have been the easiest to acquire, but he decided to go with Thunderbird wings. Thunderbird wings were going to be the hardest and most expensive ingredients he needed to acquire, but it would be worth it as Harry would also gain the ability to fly without any support if he used Thunderbird wings for the ritual. Now that all of the ingredients were decided, he needed to decide when to perform the rituals. According to the book, Harry could either perform a ritual on his birthdays annually or he could perform a ritual during the nights of a full moon. If he performed the rituals annually on his birthdays, then the gains will be better, but the time required to complete the whole set of 7 rituals wasn't worth it. So, Harry decided to perform a ritual during the nights of a full moon, and he could always perform a set of 3 rituals with performing each ritual annually on his birthdays. Yes, that is exactly what he was going to do. So, Harry once again decided to delve into research, and after spending 3 more hours, he finally decided to use the set of 3 rituals he previously performed but with different ingredients. A ritual for his mind, a ritual for his body, and finally, a ritual for his magic. 1. The ritual to enhance his mind. This time, Harry decided to use a part of a sphinx brain or a centaur brain for the ritual. 2. The ritual to enhance his body. This time, Harry decided to use a dragon heart or a part of a dragon heart for the ritual. 3. The ritual to enhance his magic. This time, Harry decided to use a Thunderbird heart or a part of a Thunderbird heart for the rituals. Even though Harry made up his mind about the ingredients, he decided that he wouldn't mind changing them if they weren't available. Harry finally released a huge sigh and leaned back in his seat. "What do you think, Mom?" Harry asked as he stared outside the window. The sun was already coming up and he was so engrossed in his research that he didn't even notice that he stayed up the whole night. "I would have loved it if you have decided to choose the superior ingredients, but I agree with you. You made the right call." Some of the ingredients are simply impossible to acquire. Lily shook her head with a hint of disappointment in her voice. Though I am glad that you decided to perform another set of 3 rituals with superior ingredients, Lily added joyfully, and Harry couldn't help but chuckle at her words. Thank you, I am aware that I need a lot of power if I need to survive, Harry said as he knew that his mom became extremely happy whenever he was pursuing power. She wouldn't have cared in the slightest even if he was sacrificing virgin villas or virgin females. Harry shook his head with a smile. Harry has long realized that his mom was not a nice person, but he loved her the way she was. Harry would never change a single thing about her, as he knew that even though his mom was somewhat evil, she loved him with her whole being. Chapter 36, The Boy Who Stole, Borrowed, I. And that's it. I don't think he will deny my request, Harry mused in amusement as he finally finished penning a letter to Carlson. He wanted to keep using the training room he had been using for the last 10 months, and since Jacqueline had graduated, she could no longer use the room. In the letter, Harry mentioned how he was planning to participate in the Under-13 tournament and he needed a place for practice. He even decided to mention the room Jacqueline was allowing him to use offhandedly, not wanting to give an impression that he was gunning for something specific. Lily snorted inside his mind. He will give you the room, don't worry. He wants to use your fame, there is no way he is going to deny your request, and you did give him a valid reason behind your request, Lily drawled in a bland tone. I know, and I am specifically banking on that, Harry muttered as he rolled his shoulders and stood up from his seat. He grabbed the letters from the table and started to make his way toward Hedwig's perch. As soon as Hedwig saw the letters in his hand, she stretched her wings and hooted in excitement. I think someone is really excited about the letters, Harry said in a sing-song voice as Harry started to pet Hedwig. When he bought her, he never thought that she would grow on him so quickly. At first, he simply wanted an owl for his letters, but now, Hedwig was much more than a post owl. Harry had done a lot of research on familiar bonds when he noticed a bond forming between the two of them. It wasn't a literal bond, but more like a connection between the two of them. Like Harry could feel whenever Hedwig was around, or how Hedwig will fly in on her own whenever he finished writing a letter. Hedwig has always been a smart girl, but there was no way she could know when he finished a letter. Hedwig barked with a hint of indignation, but at the same time, she puffed out her feathers to enjoy the petting. I know, Harry muttered as he continued to pet her. Harry couldn't speak owl, but he could still understand what she was trying to say. Okay. You know where to take these letters, right? Harry asked, and this time, Hedwig simply threw him a dirty look, before she screeched in indignation. Harry could clearly feel her irritation. She was irritated over the fact that her human dared to insult her intelligence. Sorry. Of course you know where to take these, Harry corrected himself as he handed the letters to her. Hedwig puffed out her feathers at the compliment as she clutched the letters with one of her talons. Harry knew that it was going to be a long flight since one of the letters was addressed to Jacqueline, the second one was addressed to Brittany, and finally, the last one was addressed to his headmaster, Carlson Kent. Be careful and have a good flight. Harry waved at her and Hedwig flew off her perch as she made her way out of the window after giving her human a last look. That owl is way too temperamental. You are not even 12 and you already have so many girls around you, Lily sniffed and started to pout. With all these girls around you, you will forget your poor mother, Lily added as she started to sniff. Harry simply rolled his eyes at his mom's antics. Mom, just like you said, I am only 12 and I don't want to think about girls right now. I have more important things to do, Harry explained dryly as he made his way toward his wardrobe. Thanks to Lucas, Harry was familiar with the Alley of the Druids, so he wanted to look around the shops in the alley for the ingredients he needed for the rituals, before asking for Jacqueline's help. That is why Harry didn't mention anything about the rituals in the letter. He had taken her suggestion to his heart and he never told anyone what he was up to, but he suspected that Jacqueline already knew that he was performing rituals. After all, she must have noticed that after the Christmas break, all of a sudden, he was a lot more stronger than before. Though I am still surprised that Dumbledore didn't try anything during the last year, Harry mused all of a sudden when he remembered why he was trying so hard to become strong. Yes, I am surprised too, but Hadrian, you should never underestimate him. He is old, extremely so. He knows how to be patient. While he may not getting any younger, he can still live for decades. He knows how to play the long game, he won't make the amateur mistake of revealing his hand so soon in the game, Lily warned Harry in a grave tone. After hearing his mom's words, Harry could only nod his head with a hard look on his face. His mom was right. He needed to be careful. Underestimating either Albus Dumbledore or Voldemort would be simply foolish. After getting dressed in a fresh pair of clothes, he left his apartment to look around the shops for the ingredients he needed. After nearly 5 hours, Harry finally returned to his apartment with a complicated look on his face. He did find almost all the ingredients in the alley, and since none of them were illegal, he could buy them without any issues, but he was lacking some funds. If he wanted to buy all the ingredients for the rituals, then he would need to empty his trust vault. Due to the transfer charges, he will only be able to withdraw 980 galleons, as the goblins would keep 20 galleons to themselves. Greedy little cretins, Harry cursed internally, and Lily frantically nodded her head in agreement. He still needed to pay 400 galleons for his apartment. He needed to pay 200 galleons this term and needed to pay the rest in January, next year, leaving him only 580 galleons. Then he also needed to pay 100 galleons for his tuition, leaving him only 480 galleons. It was a lot, but at the same time, the money wasn't much, as he needed to buy a lot of expensive ingredients for the rituals. You can always buy second-hand books for your second year. You have already finished the curriculum on your own, so it won't matter if your books are the latest edition or not, or you can go without buying anything. That will save you at least 20 galleons, Lily suggested, and Harry had to admit, it was a good idea. Maybe, I can sell my first-year books to a second-hand shop. I think I will be able to get at least 5 galleons for them, Harry mused thoughtfully. He no longer needed the first-year books, so it would be a waste to keep them when he was tight on budget. Even if he followed his mom's suggestion while selling his first-year books to a second-hand bookshop, he was falling short of the amount of gold he needed for his shopping. The Thunderbird wings on themselves were going to cost him 400 galleons, leaving him only 80 galleons, which simply weren't enough for him to buy the rest of the ingredients. You could always take some money from the Muggles. I do think they have too much money, and taking a few $1,000s won't hurt them, Lily pointed out thoughtfully. Once again, Harry had to admit, his mom's suggestion was pretty sound. Harry didn't have any qualms over borrowing some money from the rich. The names of the few rich Muggles popped into Harry's mind, but all of a sudden a terrible, but an amazing idea popped into his mind. The goblins loved jewels and shiny stones. The little blighters had a whole counter dedicated to the jewel trade. I think I need to make a trip to the Muggle world, Harry mumbled as he once again decided to leave the apartment, but then all of a sudden, his stomach rumbled, reminding him of the fact that he was yet to have his lunch. Norton, Harry called out loudly, and the said house elf appeared with a soft pop. What can Norton best doing for Master Hadrian? Norton asked eagerly. Norton, I will be leaving again. Can you make something for me in a short time? Harry asked, and after thinking for a bit, Norton excitedly nodded his head before popping away. He didn't even bother to tell Harry what he was planning to make, so Harry simply rolled his eyes and decided to wait. Hadrian, what are you planning to do? Lily asked curiously. She could feel that Harry was planning something else. I think I will be going diamond hunting, Harry answered internally as a wide grin formed on his lips. Chapter 37, The Boy Who Borrowed, 2. After finishing his lunch, Harry made his way toward the public library to acquire knowledge for his diamond hunting excursion, and the public library was the only place he could acquire all the knowledge without raising suspicions. It wasn't unusual for students to look up stuff like that for essays. Harry arrived at the library after a long bus ride, and then he made his way straight toward the current affairs section. After grabbing a few magazines, he made his way toward the recent discoveries section. After grabbing a few magazines from that section too, he found himself a comfortable spot to read. Howard Stark is finally dead. I am surprised that he didn't go off with a bang, Lily muttered inside his mind as she read the headline plastered over one of the magazine covers. I was expecting him to be assassinated or something, Lily wondered thoughtfully. His mom knew the man, it piqued his interest, so he decided to start with that magazine. Apparently, Howard Anthony Walter Stark was an inventor, scientist, engineer, businessman, and movie director. He was also the founder of Stark Industries. The man also worked on various projects during World War II. The man was also involved in the creation of Captain America. After that, most of the things written about him were useless. Harry's interest was piqued when he read that the man was involved in the creation of Captain America, the first superhero. He would have loved to know more about the said process, but the man was already dead, and he suspected that the man wouldn't have revealed the process to him anyway. After reading about all of his accomplishments, Harry agreed with his mom. It was simply way too mundane for a man like Howard Stark to die in a car crash along with his wife. He was sure that the man has probably accomplished a lot more, but they were never revealed to the public. Harry simply shrugged before placing the magazine at the side. Then he grabbed one of the recent Discoveries magazines and started to read. It didn't take him much time to find his target, Diavik Diamond Mine. The mine was only discovered a month ago and they haven't even started digging yet. Yes, Harry would need to invest a lot of time since he would probably need to dig out diamonds on his own, but it was all right. This was probably the easiest way to make money without risking too much. Yes, guards are going to be posted around the premises, but he was confident that he could avoid all of them and get his hands on some precious stones. Though, he would need to train a lot. He needed to become extremely proficient in using disillusionment charms and scent masking charms. From the same magazine, he was also able to find the location of the said mine. Now, he simply needed to make his way to the mine after he became proficient in disillusionment charm and scent masking charm. Harry grabbed all the magazines and returned them to the shelves before leaving. It is going to be quite risky, you know, Lily pointed out as she knew that the mine was being guarded by armed personnel. I am sure. I simply need to avoid the guards and go digging, Harry pointed out, and Lily couldn't help but scoff at her son's words. It won't be that simple. You don't even know where to start digging, Lily huffed, and Harry started to grin smugly. I am sure I can find a spell to locate diamonds. After all, I am probably not the only one who decided to dig a diamond. Wizards and witches have been using diamonds since ancient times and I already know a spell to dig, Harry argued back in a sing-song voice. Lily hummed thoughtfully. You are probably right, but don't bet on it. Even if there is a spell to locate diamonds, you can't be certain that you will find the spell, Lily chastised Harry condescendingly, but she didn't have any actual heat in her voice. We shall see, Harry stated firmly as he made his way toward the bus stop. I told you, I will find the spell, Harry declared smugly after he finally found the spell to locate diamonds. It has been 5 days since Harry decided to dig up some diamonds, and since he returned from the public library he has been poring through the Potter library without a break. Well, he only took breaks to sleep, but he did find the spell, so it was probably all right. I am so proud of you, Hadrian, Lily beamed at Harry, feeling extremely proud. She wasn't enraged due to Harry's gloating, in fact, she only felt pride. She felt proud over the fact that her son didn't give up and decided to prove her wrong. I know, Mom. I know. Now, I need to start practicing the disillusionment charm and the scent masking charm, Harry mused as he stood up and started to stretch his body. He was already quite good at silencing charm, muggle repelling charm, and notice me not charm, so he didn't need to practice those spells. Harry could have gone without the disillusionment charm, but he didn't want to risk it with all the CCTV cameras. The Diavik Diamond Mine was probably littered with those blasted things. He didn't want the Macusa to come after him for borrowing some diamonds from non-suspecting muggles. Most of the time, magical ministries would ignore minor crimes like that, but if he ended up getting caught while breaking the statute of secrecy, his punishment will be very serious. He might even get sentenced to prison, and he was the boy who lived. He didn't want to imagine about the headlines. Good, you will be able to learn them pretty easily, Lily praised him softly. Harry cracked his neck as he made his way toward the desk. A couple of unopened letters were lying on his desk. He was quite busy these last few days and he completely forgot about the letters. He grabbed one of the letters and saw that it was from Brittany. He quickly opened the letter and a smile appeared on his face as he read the contents. He felt slightly bad for not reading the letter sooner, but he completely forgot about everything else when he started to research. Harry closed the letter and placed it on the desk before grabbing the next letter. The next letter was from Headmaster Kent. He tore the letter open and couldn't help but smile as he read the contents, but unlike before, this smile was predatory. Just like he expected, Carlson gave him the room he wanted, and not only that, but he also decided to provide Harry with a ritual room. Harry didn't know what to think about that, but he wasn't going to look a gift horse in the mouth. According to the letter, Carlson wasn't sure what Harry thought about rituals, but he still decided to provide him with a ritual room. What do you think, Mom? Harry asked his mom as he closed the letter and placed it on the table. I think before deciding anything else, you should probably inspect the room, Lily answered after pondering his question for a few seconds. To be honest, Lily still couldn't understand why it was rude to ask someone if they perform rituals or not. She could understand the keep your cards close to your chest philosophy, but it didn't make any sense to her. After all, her son was planning to buy so many ingredients which were usually used in rituals. So, anybody with a good head on top of their shoulders would know what Harry was planning to do with all those ingredients. Lily took a deep breath and decided to clear her mind. Maybe it has something to do with a person's insecurities. That was the best Lily could come up with at this moment. Okay, Harry said while nodding his head as he agreed with his mom's suggestion. He grabbed the last letter, and as he was already expecting, it was from Jacqueline. He quickly opened the letter and started to read. She was asking him to visit on Saturday. Harry was already planning to visit her on the weekend as he wanted to ask her if she could help him prepare for the Under-13 tournament. He also needed to ask her help to acquire the basilisk venom. Basilisk venom was one of the ingredients he couldn't find. Apparently, basilisk venom is an extremely regulated substance and only a few suppliers are allowed to sell them. Jacqueline could probably get him the required amount with extreme ease due to her family connections. At least, that is what Harry was hoping for, or he would have to go with basilisk blood, which was also a regulated substance, but much easier to acquire than basilisk venom. Harry took a deep breath and plopped down in his chair. He decided to answer Brittany's and Jacqueline's letters before he started to practice the disillusionment charm and the scent masking charm. Chapter 38, The Boy Who Trained, I. How are you, Jackie? Harry asked as he stepped through the flue, where Jacqueline was already waiting for his arrival. It has been quite some time since Harry started to call her using her nickname. The said girl smiled and pulled him into her arms. I am bored out of my mind. No more homework or anything else to do for that matter. Now, I am feeling kind of bad about graduating, Jacqueline said with a grin marring her face as she released Harry. Maybe I should have fudged my exams on purpose, Jacqueline muttered thoughtfully as she tapped her chin with her finger. Harry simply snorted in amusement. Your fans would have probably attacked the education department for failing you, Harry pointed out mischievously. Yet. I could see that happening, Jacqueline hummed in agreement. Well, enough about me. So, what have you been up to? Jacqueline asked, returning the favor. Studying, Harry answered with a straight face, making Jacqueline look at him in complete horror. Harry, you need to take a break. There is no need to push yourself so hard. You have already finished the 5th-year curriculum, Jacqueline reminded him warily. I love studying, thank you very much, Harry immediately defended himself, making Jacqueline roll her eyes at him in complete exasperation. Well, I guess everyone needs a hobby, Jacqueline shrugged as she nodded her head in understanding. Harry probably wasn't going to change, and from what she had seen, he really loved reading. Come on, I will introduce you to my mom, Jacqueline said as she started to lead him through the halls. Don't take this the wrong way, but I thought your family was much bigger. Harry asked with an unsure look on his face as he kept looking around. The halls were decorated with extravagant lamps and curtains. He also noticed a lot of painting on both sides of the walls, but he didn't know much about paintings in the first place, so he decided not to make any comments on them. Jacqueline started to chuckle after hearing his question. Yeah, our family is pretty big, but it isn't big like a clan. Most of them aren't here right now or I would have introduced them, Jacqueline answered while laughing as she pointed out toward the lake. Harry looked out the window only to find a group of men and children fishing. Do you want to join them? Jacqueline asked, only for Harry to shake his head in denial. If Jacqueline's father was there, then he didn't want to be anywhere near that psycho. Is your father all right with me visiting? Harry asked all of a sudden when he remembered that man wasn't happy to meet him. Instead of answering, Jacqueline simply looked away and Harry didn't miss the blush creeping on her face. He had a nagging feeling at the back of his mind that Jacqueline never bothered to tell her dad about his impending visit. Don't worry, he won't say anything. Jacqueline trailed off in a strained tone. I hope you are right. By the way, Jackie, I am planning to participate in the Under-13 tournament. Harry decided that he needed to change the topic. Jacqueline immediately turned around with an excited look on her face. Really? That's great, Jacqueline cheered excitedly. Yeah, so I was wondering if you could help me train during the holidays. Harry asked, but he already knew the answer. Of course, I can train you, and if I ask Headmaster Kent then he will probably allow me to train you during the weekends even while you are at school. Jacqueline immediately agreed to train Harry, and she was also sure that Headmaster Kent would allow her to visit the school in the weekends even when the school was in session. That will be great. Harry beamed at Jacqueline with a bright smile on his face. Harry already knew a lot of spells, but the only thing he was lacking was training. Now, there was a vast difference between dueling and fighting. Dueling was a sport and fighting was much more serious. There were no rules in fighting, you simply needed to make sure that you lived, while your enemy doesn't, or at least, your enemy is incapacitated, but knowing how to duel was much better than being a complete amateur. We can even start today if you want. Jacqueline suggested, and Harry immediately nodded his head in agreement. That is exactly what he was hoping for. Okay, I will take you to the training room after you meet my mom. We're here, Jacqueline said when the two of them finally arrived at the rear deck of the house. A few women were sitting around the table, enjoying tea and snacks. Mom, we're here, Jacqueline announced their arrival, and all the women immediately turned in their direction. Oh my, is that Harry Potter? I will be honest, the books don't do his eyes any justice, one of the women commented saucily. From the way some of the women were staring at him, Harry felt like he had entered a den of hungry hyenas. Quit it, Lyra. You are clearly making him uncomfortable, one of the women chastised the first woman with a gentle smile on her face before turning back toward Harry. I have heard a lot about you from my daughter, and ignore Lyra, she can be a bit enthusiastic, the woman said as she gestured toward the previous woman. Harry guessed that the woman was probably Jacqueline's mother, as Jacqueline was the only female Harper he knew. Hello, madams. I am Harry Potter. Thank you for welcoming me into Family Manor, Harry introduced himself, making all the women smile at him. Such manners. I have tried to install manners into my son, but I am yet to succeed, one of the women said, looking quite impressed before she started shaking her head in disappointment. Yes, yes. My son is also the same, another woman nodded her head in agreement. Harry's face started to twitch after hearing their comments. After that, Jacqueline started to introduce all the women, and Harry's guess was right, the second woman was Jacqueline's mother and the rest were her aunts or cousins. Jacqueline, why don't you take Mr. Potter and show the mansion? I think he will be quite uncomfortable among us, women. Madison Harper, Jacqueline's mother, suggested when the introductions were finally over. Thank you, Mom. That is what I wanted to do in the first place. I know he will be bored out of his mind if he stayed here, Jacqueline said as she started to lead Harry back into the mansion. Harry did hear a few amused huffs from behind, but he decided to ignore them. It took Jacqueline nearly half an hour to show him around the mansion, and when they were finally done, Jacqueline led him to the training room. The training room was a bit smaller than the training room he had been using at school, but it was still big enough for the two of them to practice. So, why don't you show me what can you do? I need to know what I am working with, Jacqueline suggested, and Harry nodded his head in understanding as he pulled out his willow and horned serpent horn wand. From Jacqueline, Harry already knew that he could use his registered wand anywhere in the magical part of the country. He could even use it in the Muggle areas, but in that case, obliviators might be dispatched by the Ministry. The statute of secrecy is very strict in this country, even though the underage magic laws were quite lax. Jacqueline whipped her wand toward the wall to spring up a target dummy from the floor. Harry took a position, but before he could cast a spell, Jacqueline stopped him. Your posture is completely wrong, Jacqueline hissed in disapproval as she started to fix his posture. It took her nearly 5 minutes to fix in posture, and Harry had to admit, he could aim and move better in his current posture. Much better, now start. Jacqueline exclaimed, and Harry immediately started to cast. He decided not to cast some of the dangerous spells he knew, as he couldn't use them in the tournament in the first place. I am impressed that you can cast all of them silently, but I am not impressed with your speed or your wand movements. You are exaggerating your wand movements quite a lot, which is slowing down the speed of your casting, Jacqueline pointed out with a frown when Harry finished casting all the spells he wanted to reveal. Harry nodded his head in understanding. I won't need to work on your spells as you know enough of them. As you are right now, you will probably win the tournament too, as I haven't seen anyone as young as you being able to cast the stunning charm or the prodigo charm, Jacqueline mused as she scratched her chin thoughtfully. But you won't last a minute in the under 15 tournament as you are right now, Jacqueline said as she nodded her head. I have decided how to train you, Jacqueline snapped her fingers with a huge grin on her face. From what I saw, the only thing you are lacking is experience. Let's duel, Harry. That will be the fastest and easiest way for you to gain experience. Jacqueline started to grin wickedly, and Harry wasn't going to admit it, but the grin on her face was making him uncomfortable. Okay, Harry simply agreed with the idea, as he also knew that dueling her was the easiest and fastest way for him to gain experience. Okay, move to the other side of the room, Jacqueline said as she started to walk away. Harry also started to make his way toward the other side of the room without wasting any more time. Harry arrived at the other end of the room and took his position. He tried to imitate the posture Jacqueline showed him as much as he could, but he knew that he was bound to have some flaws. Let's start. Jacqueline called out, and both of them fired the first spell at the same time. Chapter 39, The Boy Who Improved, 3. Harry jumped to the side to dodge the spell while Jacqueline simply leaned toward her side and the spell passed by her. She didn't even seem to be fazed by the spell, instead, she simply increased the speed of her casting. Harry couldn't help but grimace when he realized what was happening. The two of them just started, and yet, he was already on the back foot. Hadrian, don't lose focus, Lily reminded Harry, making him narrow his eyes. Even though Harry was already on the back foot, he wasn't anywhere close to giving up. He started to watch Jacqueline intently as she continued to attack him as he kept dodging her attacks. It was a good thing that Jacqueline didn't seem to be in a hurry to knock him out. She was simply casting some random spells at him with some disarming charms and knockback jinxes mixed in. Harry decided to return the favor and cast a couple of knockback jinxes at her as he dodged her spells by moving around, and since he was continuously moving around, his aim was a bit off, but they weren't off by much as the spells were still heading toward Jacqueline. Once again, Jacqueline easily dodged the spells and he didn't miss how easily she dodged them. She dodged the spells by simply leaning her body to the side. Dodging Jacqueline's spells was becoming harder with each passing moment. Harry was using every opportunity to counterattack, but it was simply not enough. Jacqueline was using point casting, so her casting was much faster than his and he had a nagging feeling that she wasn't going all out. With a grimace on his face, Harry decided to try something out. He decided to imitate Jacqueline's technique, and while his movements weren't as refined as Jacqueline's, he could instantly feel the difference. Instead of jumping around to dodge the spells, Harry started to dodge the spells by simply leaning his body to the side or sidestepping. Jacqueline's way was simply way more efficient than whatever he was doing until now. Meanwhile, Jacqueline's eyes grew wide in surprise and shock. Harry was imitating her. This was probably the first time he saw her in action and he could already imitate her movements. She was left completely gobsmacked, and after a few moments, a smile formed on her face. Harry was clearly way more talented than her. If he could improve so much just by watching her, then how much could he improve with appropriate training? Harry's movements were clumsy, and he still wasn't anywhere close to perfecting them, but he was clearly improving. Jacqueline couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy, but she quickly crushed the feeling. Yes, she would have been over the moon if she had his talent, but at the same time, she couldn't hate him for being more talented than her. In fact, she started to feel proud, but the duel has gone long enough. It was about time she ended the duel. Jacqueline stepped forward and her speed increased as she started casting spells even faster. Harry grimaced as he had to cast Protego to defend himself, but the next moment, the shield shattered when Jacqueline cast a shield breaker. Harry jumped to the side to dodge a disarming charm, but that brought him right in the path of a knockback jinx. The spell hit him on the side and Harry was blown away by the spell. He landed on a heap and ended up releasing a groan when the pain coursed through his body. Another spell hit him while he was still down and he felt his wand slip out of his hand. This was it. He lost. Jacqueline wiped the floor with him, and she could have wiped the floor with him much quicker if she was going all out. Don't need to feel so disappointed, Hadrian. You tried your best and you improved. You lost, but it was to be expected. Just know that I am really proud of you. Lily tried to comfort her son as she knew exactly how he was feeling. But Mom, I lost. How can you be proud of me? I disappointed you. Harry was feeling really horrible for disappointing his mom. He wasn't expecting to win in the first place, but he wasn't expecting to lose this easily. Hadrian, I will be never disappointed in you. You did way better than I was expecting. Yes, you lost, but you didn't give up. You started to improve during the fight and that was more than impressive, Lily said softly as she started to channel her feelings through the connection. Harry started to feel the warm feelings flowing into him through the connection and he immediately started to smile. Yes, his mom wasn't disappointed in him. In fact, his mom was feeling proud and it felt nice. Meanwhile, Jacqueline simply stared at Harry's form with a complicated look on her face. His wand was resting in her hand, and the memories of the short, but impressive duel kept flashing inside her mind. His reflexes and reaction speeds were the best she had ever seen, and with the ease he was improving also left her completely gobsmacked. Her lips started to curl upwards as a smile formed on her face. How long you are going to keep lying there, or do you want me to give you a hand? Jacqueline asked with a grin as she started to make her way toward Harry, who was still lying on the floor. Be careful on the way, I left my dignity somewhere there on the floor, Harry answered as he slowly rolled over on his back. Jacqueline snorted in amusement. I don't see anything on the floor. It might be way too small to see with naked eyes, Jacqueline retorted in an amused tone. Ouch! Harry sat up with a grimace on his face and placed his hands over his chest. That hurt, Jackie. Harry mumbled as he gave her a mocked hurt look. Jacqueline's eyes twinkled in amusement as she finally arrived in front of Harry and extended his wand toward him. Harry grabbed the wand and slowly stood up. Harry, you were amazing. To be honest, I wasn't expecting you to be this good, and not only that, you improved a lot during the duel. Jacqueline praised him as she patted his shoulder. Harry mutely nodded his head. Thank you, Jackie. Harry thanked Jacqueline after a few moments of silence. So, do you want to have another go? Jacqueline asked with a grin on her face, only for Harry to smile at her excitedly as he nodded his head in agreement. Time skip, nearly 3 weeks. This place is huge. Harry exclaimed inside with a stumped look marring his face. He was watching the Diavik diamond mine from the air. He was able to get his hands on a second-hand clean sweep 6 for only 40 galleons. 40 galleons were a lot of gold, but 40 galleons weren't much when it came to brooms. Brooms were expensive and getting a good broom like clean sweep 6 for only 40 galleons was a really good deal. The broom might have gone out of production, but it was still in very good condition. Whoever owned this broom before him, took good care of it. There was something else Harry realized after buying the broom. He was a natural flyer and he loved flying. He may not be a huge fan of Quidditch, but he could fly for a whole day without getting tired or bored. That is also why he decided to fly to the Diavik diamond mine on his broom instead of using a muggle means of transport. Harry wasn't worried about MCU sending Aurors or Obliviators after him, as brooms in America came with built-in muggle repelling enchantment, and as long as the charms were active, MCU will ignore you. I think even with the spell it will take a lot of time to find the diamonds, so I think you better get started, Lily reminded him, and Harry nodded his head in understanding. Yep, Harry quipped as he made his way toward the ground. He wasn't going to land inside the premises as it would simply be foolish with all the CCTV cameras. A lot has happened in the last 3 weeks. Jacqueline had started to train him and he was yet to beat her even once, but he couldn't deny the improvements. While he still wasn't anywhere close to her level, he was still getting there, and after another long chat with his mom, he remembered that he wasn't even 12 yet, so there was no need to blame himself for his powerlessness. He was several folds stronger than anyone around his age, and Jacqueline was probably the strongest graduate in her year. Harry has also performed the first ritual of the set of 7 during the night of the full moon using Sphinx blood, and Harry could already feel the improvements. His occlumency was progressing much faster than before, and his mind was also much sharper than before. Even his reaction times have improved a lot after the ritual, which helped him a lot during his mock duels with Jacqueline. Speaking of Jacqueline, she promised to get him 2 vials of basilisk venom, but it was going to cost him somewhere around 4,000 galleons to 5,000 galleons. The price almost made him see stars, but he was able to hold on. If he could successfully liberate diamonds from this mine, then he wouldn't need to worry about gold anymore, and that is why he was here to liberate some diamonds from Diavik diamond mine before his birthday. If he succeeded, then he could also buy a part of a Sphinx brain for the set of 3 rituals he was planning to perform annually on his birthdays. Harry finally landed on a nearby hill and decided to hide his broom by casting a Notice Me Not charm on the broom, before covering it with dust. He nodded his head in satisfaction before he started to head toward the mine after casting a disillusionment charm, a scent masking charm, and a silencing charm on himself. Chapter 40, The Boy Who Stole, Borrowed, 3. While Harry's expedition was progressing without a hitch, he severely underestimated the time he would need to dig through the ground to get his hands on the diamonds. Thankfully, magic was helping, or it would have probably taken him days to find even a single diamond if he was digging with mundane tools. Ha! I am tired. Harry plopped down inside one of the holes he had dug after casting a disillusionment charm and a muggle repelling charm at the entrance of the hole. You are feeling magical exhaustion, Hadrian. I would recommend you to take a nap after you get something to eat, Lily explained, and Harry nodded his head in understanding. Harry pulled out a miniature trunk from his pocket and placed it on the ground. He tapped the trunk with his wand and the trunk returned to its original size. He popped the hood of the trunk to reveal several water bottles and some wrapped packages. In one of the corners, the diamonds he had liberated were stashed. He grabbed the diamonds he found in this hole and placed them with the others. After that, he grabbed one of the wrapped packages and a water bottle before closing the hood. He unwrapped the package to reveal some sandwiches. He knew that it would take a lot of time for him to find diamonds, so he came prepared for camping. He could have brought a tent or a sleeping bag too, but he was a wizard, so he could easily transfigure or conjure something. It would also help with his training. Mom, how much do you think I am gonna get for all that? Harry asked internally as he bit into one of the sandwiches. Pfft! Who knows? More than 10 years have passed and the rings we used in our marriage were taken from the Potter vaults. Lily shrugged off dismissively. Though I wonder what happened to them after we kicked the bucket, Lily wondered thoughtfully. Don't you want me to get them? Harry asked, sounding really uncomfortable at the prospect of digging his mom's and dad's graves, but he wanted to know if she wanted the rings. While he didn't want to see his mom's rotting corpse, he would get the rings if she really wanted him to. Merlin, no, Lily immediately rejected the idea. First of all, she no longer felt any sort of connection to the ring James gave her. Now, the only thing she cared about was her son. She knew her love for her son was turning into something obsessive and something very unhealthy, and while it was wrong on so many levels, she simply couldn't stop herself. Secondly, she didn't want him to see her rotting corpse. Okay, Harry trailed off as he slowly nodded his head. He didn't understand why, but his mom's voice sounded kind of desperate. While he wanted to ask questions, he decided to drop the matter since his mom clearly didn't want him to get those rings. After finishing his meal break, Harry tapped his wand on the ground, making the surface much more softer and comfortable before conjuring a pillow. Yes, he was magically exhausted, but it didn't mean that he didn't have any magic left in his tank. Harry slowly slumped down on the ground and placed the pillow under his head. He rolled his shoulders and groaned in satisfaction. "Good night, Mom," Harry called out inside his mind cheerfully as he closed his eyes. "Good night, Hadrian," Lily wished him back in a similar fashion. For a moment, Harry felt a pang of guilt in his heart. While he could fall asleep, his mom couldn't. He had no idea what his mom was going through or how she was dealing with it. He started to wonder if there was a way to help his mom, but before he could come up with anything, he drifted off to sleep. After all, he was feeling extremely tired. Harry climbed out of the hole, completely rested and re-energized. He turned toward the mountain of dirt beside the hole before he pointed his wand at the pile and started to refill the hole with dirt. It was a good thing he also decided to relieve himself before climbing out of the hole, or he would have to look for a place to take care of his business. Harry looked around and cracked his neck. It was already dark, though Harry had no idea about the time. Unlike he was suspecting, the whole mine wasn't riddled with CCTV cameras. They have only placed CCTV cameras on the fence, but guard patrols could be seen loitering around all over the base. All of them were armed with guns. Even his mom couldn't give him all the information regarding firearms. Harry knew that firearms were extremely dangerous, and he also knew that firearms could kill him, so he wanted to know everything he could learn about firearms. He had been wanting to get his hands on some firearms, but he didn't know how or where to acquire one, but now, he could simply borrow firearms from these people. He didn't think they would mind, and even if they did, there wasn't anything they could do about it. "Are you really planning to steal firearms?" Lily asked in a slightly worried tone. She didn't know much about firearms, so she wouldn't be able to help him with them, so there was always a chance that he might end up hurting himself. "Yes, firearms are a threat. I need to know how they work, and I also need to know how much of a threat they are to our kind," Harry said firmly as he started to make his way toward the barracks. Harry had already cast the disillusionment charm, scent masking charm, and silencing charm on himself before climbing out of the hole, so he wasn't worried that someone might notice. Even the dogs accompanying the guards would fail to notice him, but Harry didn't want to tempt fate, as dogs are known to have some sort of sixth sense. That is why Harry has been avoiding the guard patrols with dogs. Not all of the guard patrols have dogs with them, and he didn't have any problems getting close to any of them. That is how he found that they were also wearing some sort of armor on their torso. He also wanted to know about those armors now that he had seen them. He finally arrived in front of the barracks, and it was laughingly easy for him to sneak inside the building. The guards outside the building didn't even notice him when he climbed inside the building through one of the open windows. He looked around to see if he could deduce where he was. The whole room was filled with bunks, beds and lockers. Harry realized that this was probably one of the rooms where the guards slept. From what Harry had seen, there were more than 200 guards, so there was no way that all of them could fit in this room. He could have counted the beds to see how many guards slept in this room, but there was something on the wall which caught Harry's attention. A blush slowly crept up on Harry's face as he kept staring at the wall. He didn't know what to say or how to react. He simply kept staring at the wall with a dumb look on his face, and finally smoke started to come out of his head. A few drops of blood trickled down from his nose, but he didn't even notice that. He was too lost staring at the wall. "Hadrian! Hadrian!" Lily released a defeated sigh before she started to call out to her son to break him out of his trance. Harry finally broke out of the trance, and that is when he realized what he was doing. Another blush crept on his face as he started to sputter, trying to defend himself. Mom, so sorry," Harry tried to defend himself, but before he could continue, his mom cut him off. It is all right, Hadrian. I understand you are finally reaching that age. I think it is finally time to give you the talk, Lily said softly. It should have been James' duty to give him the talk, but now it was up to her, and Lily couldn't help but feel excited at the prospect. She was trying really hard not to reveal her excitement to him, but internally she was almost whooping in joy. Her baby boy simply wasn't staring at the wall. He was staring at the poster of a naked red-haired woman. A small part of her mind was telling her that what she was feeling was wrong, extremely wrong, but the rest of her mind was feeling extremely excited and horny at the same time. Even though the majority of her mind was in the gutter, which was telling her to do extremely unhealthy things with her baby boy, that part of her mind was feeling two different things at the same time. One of those parts was extremely happy that Hadrian was attracted to the red-haired woman even though the whole wall was filled with posters of naked women, while the other part wanted Hadrian to only stare at her. This part of her mind wanted her to reach out to him and tell him that he was only allowed to stare at her. Meanwhile, Harry finally realized that he was having a nosebleed and started to wipe his nose with his sleeve. He looked around at the floor to see if there was blood on the floor or not. Fortunately, there wasn't any blood on the floor. He internally sighed and decided to look around the room. There were several posters of naked women on the walls, and while all of them attracted him, the one which attracted him the most was the poster of the red-haired woman. Harry had no idea what he was feeling, but he decided to wait for the talk his mom was speaking about. He only hoped that his mom wasn't angry or disappointed in him. Chapter 41, The Boy Who Stole, Borrowed, 4. Harry finally found his way to the armory after wandering inside the barracks for nearly half an hour. His mom hadn't spoken much since the incident, so he was starting to feel somewhat worried. He wanted to say something to his mom, but he didn't even know how to start the conversation in the first place. His mom did tell him that she was going to give him the talk. He had no idea what this talk was going to consist of, but it must be something related to what he was feeling when was staring at the poster of the red-haired woman. The woman in the poster wasn't wearing any clothes, just like all the other posters on the wall, and this was the first time he saw a woman without any clothes. At first, the poster simply caught his eye because he was curious. He might be young, but he knew that male and female bodies were different. So he simply wanted to know how a female body was different from a male body, but after staring at the poster for only a few moments, something started to happen. He started to feel weird, and he also felt something weird going on with his penis. He could no longer look away from the poster. It felt like someone has cast a spell on him to make him entranced. The other posters were also having a similar effect on him, but to a lesser degree. He was so confused after the whole incident, and he was still confused right now, which was basically stopping him from saying anything. He didn't want to make a bigger mess by asking the wrong question. Now, he could only wait for the talk and hope that it could shed some light on the issue. There is a CCTV, Lily pointed out, breaking Harry out of his musing. He halted his steps as he looked up at the door leading to the armory. Harry stared at the steel door in front of him with a complicated look on his face. He could easily unlock the door with the first-year unlocking charm, but his actions will be caught on CCTV. He didn't want to break the statute in any form, as he didn't want Aurors coming after him. So, there was only one thing he could do right now: wait. Yes, it was going to be extremely boring, tiring, and time-consuming, but he was determined to get his hands on some firearms and the armor the guards were wearing. He will probably get his chance when the shifts change. He looked around and nodded his head in satisfaction. The hall was quite wide, so there was a very small chance that someone might accidentally collide with him, revealing his presence. So, he decided to stand right beneath the CCTV camera and wait for his chance. He leaned back on the wall and closed his eyes. Since he didn't have anything better to do, he decided to work on his acclimnacy. He could have gone to chat with his mom, but he didn't know how much time he had before he would get his chance, but from what he felt, the talk was going to be quite long. Harry's eyes snapped open when he finally heard some voices heading toward him. I wonder how long I have been waiting here, Harry questioned himself, not expecting an answer in the first place. If his mom could cast magic, then it would have been a different story, but his mom couldn't, and while Harry could have cast the Tempest charm, the CCTV would have caught the floating digits. He pushed himself off the wall, and the guards who were approaching the armory finally came into his view. It was a group of 20, and none of them were carrying firearms or wearing armors. Harry cracked his neck and rolled his shoulders to remove the stiffness from his body. They must be coming here to grab firearms and armors, Lily pointed out, and Harry nodded in agreement. He has also thinking along the same lines. He pulled out his wand and held it out, just in case any of the guards came in contact with him. He would have to confound them as he wasn't willing to waste this chance. The guards were joking and laughing as they finally arrived in front of the steel door. One of them stepped forward and knocked on the door. Team C is here to grab their equipment. The man called out loudly. Wait a sec. A voice answered from the other side of the door, and now, Harry was really glad that he decided to wait outside the door instead of using magic to open the door. It was foolish of him to not use the human revealing charm after arriving here, a mistake he won't be repeating again. A clang was heard from the other side of the door and the door was pulled open. Harry's eyes grew wide in surprise when he took in the sight of what was inside the room. The room was filled with firearms. All of them were the same models, at least, all of them looked the same. After getting a grip on himself, he easily slipped into the armory and found a tubby man sitting at a desk right beside the door. The man was so fat that he reminded Harry of Vernon. It brought back the memories of his revenge and it brought a smile to his face. Harry shook his head as he started to look around the armory. He wanted to make sure that there weren't any CCTVs inside the armory, and after looking for a few minutes, he finally confirmed that there were no CCTVs inside the room. Harry was really glad about that, or it would have been impossible for him to accomplish his task. In that case, not only would have wasted his time waiting outside the armory, but he would also have to risk himself by attacking a guard patrol to rob them. He wanted to get his hands on the firearms at any cost. Now that he has confirmed that there were no CCTVs inside the armory, he decided to wait for the guards to leave. After nearly 20 minutes, the guards finally left, leaving only the tubby man beside him inside the room. The tubby man laughed at their joke as he closed the steel door and locked it from the inside. The man chuckled again as he plopped down in his seat and grabbed the book he was reading. Meanwhile, Harry slowly crept behind the man's back, and as soon as he was close enough, he pointed his wand at the back of the man's head and cast the stunning charm silently. The red beam struck the man and he immediately slumped down on the desk with a loud thud. Harry moved closer to the man and cast the stunning charm at the man for the second time, just to make sure. I need to move quickly, I don't know when another group is going to arrive, Harry mused inside his mind as he pulled out the miniature trunk from his pocket and placed it on the ground before enlarging it with a tap of his wand. He popped the hood open and started to move toward one of the racks. Hadrian, don't forget to look for manuals, Lily reminded him sternly, and Harry nodded his head in understanding. Yes, getting his hands on a manual will be good. That is some sort of shotgun, I believe. My grandfather used to have something like this, Lily wondered aloud as Harry grabbed a firearm from the racks. He inspected the firearm before placing it inside his trunk. After that, his mom failed to recognize the other firearms he grabbed. There were 4 types of firearms in the armory and he grabbed one of each. Now that he has acquired the firearms, it was about time he grabbed some ammunition of each type. He had been carefully watching the guards and they grabbed the ammunition from the lockers which needed different keys to unlock. This time, he didn't hesitate and simply used magic to unlock the lockers. Since he had no idea what sort of ammunition was required for each type of firearm he grabbed, he decided to grab some of everything. He also couldn't believe his luck when he also found the manuals inside the lockers. Thankfully, they had diagrams on top of each manual, so it made it easier for him to grab the manuals. He decided to take one of each since taking more than one would be useless. He wouldn't learn anything extra if he grabbed 2 manuals. After that, he made his way toward the racks where the armors were kept. Apparently, they were called Kevlar and Harry decided to grab 2, in case he damaged one of them while experimenting. Harry nodded his head in satisfaction as he placed the Kevlars inside the trunk. There was barely any space left inside the trunk, but Harry couldn't help but grin like a loon at the sight. He was about to close the hood when something caught his eye. He grabbed one of the knives from the rack and pulled it out of the sheath. He didn't need to be a genius to know that the knife was extremely sharp. He grabbed another knife from the rack and placed the 2 of them inside his trunk along with everything else he grabbed. Once again nodding his head in satisfaction, he finally closed the trunk. He shrunk the trunk with a tap of his wand and placed it inside his pocket. After that, he moved behind the unconscious man and silently cast the reviving charm to awaken the man, followed by a confundus to make sure that the man didn't feel anything was out of place. The man groaned as he slowly sat up. The man yawned before shrugging his shoulders and then he went back to reading his book like nothing happened. Harry, who was standing right behind him, smiled like a Cheshire cat. Now, he only needed to wait for a chance to slip out. He didn't even need to wait more than half an hour before someone knocked on the door and called out. The tubby unlocked the door and pulled it open for the ones who knocked on the door. It was another team of 20 and this team was fully equipped, so Harry guessed that the previous group probably relieved this group from their duty. While he wanted to wait and see if this group would notice the missing firearms or ammunition, he wasn't going to miss this chance to slip out. So, Harry carefully slipped out of the room with a satisfied look on his face. It was a nice haul, he admitted inside his mind as he walked away from the armory with a spring in his steps. Chapter 42, The Boy Who Haggled. After spending a week digging diamonds at the Diavik diamond mine, Harry returned to New York and made his way straight to his apartment as he wanted to exchange the diamonds for gold as quickly as possible. Tomorrow was his birthday and he wanted to perform the ritual at sharp 12 o'clock at night. He wouldn't gain anything extra by performing the ritual at midnight, but tomorrow morning, Jacqueline and Brittany were going to come over to celebrate his birthday. After the ritual, Harry knew that he was going to be tired and that was why he wanted to perform it at midnight. That way, he will have enough time to rest his body. Harry entered his apartment and after taking a nice and long relaxing bath, he got dressed in a fresh pair of robes. He knew that he couldn't take the whole trunk to Gringotts, so he decided to use a plain-looking sack to carry the diamonds. Nodding his head in satisfaction, he left his apartment and started to make his way toward the Gringotts. Harry arrived at Gringotts and made his way straight toward the jewel trade counter. As expected of the goblin, it didn't even bother to look up whatever he was doing. To be honest, this was a trend all the goblins followed. All of them would keep looking down at their desk until you speak up. Maybe, the goblins knowingly ignored them as a means to look down on the wizarding kind. I have something I want to exchange for galleons, Harry said, sounding almost aloof. The goblins weren't his friends, so there was no way he was going to treat them nicely if they didn't, and from all of his interactions with their kind, he finally understood why nobody liked goblins. The goblin looked up and stared at Harry with a scowl on his face. We only accept jewels, the goblin drawled in a bored tone as he bared his sharp teeth. Instead of flinching back in fear, a smile appeared on Harry's face as he nodded his head. Then it is good that I have brought jewels, Harry exclaimed cheerfully as he placed the sack on the desk. The goblin stared at Harry for a few seconds before he finally grabbed the sack and opened it. The goblin stared inside the sack for a few seconds before grabbing one of the diamonds from the sack. The goblin placed the diamond in his mouth and bit it before nodding his head in satisfaction. The goblin returned the diamond inside the sack and looked at Harry. A feral grin formed on his face. The stones are authentic, I will give you 12,500 galleons for them, the goblin revealed, and the grin on his face widened. Harry quickly did the math in his head and couldn't help but frown. That's too little. The stones are at least worth 20,000 galleons, Harry complained, making the goblin scowl in displeasure. The stones haven't been processed, we will need to process them on our own, which also means extra work for us. 12,500 galleons, take it or leave it, the goblin almost snarled at Harry. Harry knew that even 20,000 galleons were too little for the number of diamonds he bought, but the only reason he proposed the amount was because he knew that the diamonds weren't processed, but 12,500 galleons were simply too little. He would be a fool to accept the deal, no matter how much he needed the gold. Fine then, I will be taking my business somewhere else, Harry growled as he grabbed the sack, and started to walk toward the exit, surprising the goblin. To be honest, he also knew that 12,500 galleons were little for the diamonds, but he wanted to get as much profit as he could from the deal. Though the goblin wasn't expecting the boy to simply walk away. There were some other places where the boy could sell the diamonds and they would offer the boy more gold than he was offering. They would probably ask questions, but that was not the point. Wait. 17,000 galleons, that is my last offer, the goblin called out, making Harry stop. He slowly turned around and looked at the goblin. To be honest, Harry didn't know anywhere else to sell the diamonds, but he decided to simply walk away because he refused to make such a huge loss, and he also knew that the goblin would probably call out to him if the goblin really wanted the diamonds. In other words, Harry took a gamble and it worked, but he still wasn't satisfied with the amount of gold the goblin was offering. 19,000 galleons, Harry called out as he slowly returned to the counter. The goblin realized what the boy was doing, but he refused to play the game. 17,500 and we will open a vault for you, which will be completely free of charge. Take it or leave it, the goblin practically snarled this time. The boy wasn't even 13 and the boy was already haggling with him, unacceptable. If the boy didn't accept the deal, then he would need to use other means to acquire the diamonds. The goblin was completely fine with that, as he will hire some wizards to do the dirty work. Wizards, who have failed to pay their debts, and they would practically do anything to get rid of their debts, as none of them would want to end up in the goblin mines. Meanwhile, Harry also realized that he probably couldn't push the goblin anymore. What about the annual charges? Harry asked with a sniff. Even though he knew he couldn't push the goblin anymore, it didn't mean that he was going to show him any weakness. The goblin bared his teeth. Waved the goblin bit out unhappily, making Harry smile as he returned the sack to the desk. We have a deal. I will be taking 7,500 galleons with me and place the rest in the vault. It was nice doing business with you. Harry beamed at the goblin. The goblin barely held himself back from throttling the smug brat. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself, my name is John Doe, Harry added innocently while smiling brightly. The goblin almost fell down from his chair. He had never seen anyone trying to sell such a bald-faced lie with such innocence. The goblin had to admit, the boy was good. The goblin clearly understood the message. The boy was telling him to use the name John Doe since he needed a name for the vault. Fine, wait here, the goblin barked while nodding at the boy, and then he grabbed the sack. The goblin jumped down from his chair and disappeared into the back. After nearly 15 minutes, the goblin finally returned with a sack in his hands and climbed on the chair. The goblin gave Harry a toothy grin and placed the sack on the table. 7,500 galleons, since the gold won't fit in the pouch you gave us, we had to use an expandable pouch. We did deduct the amount from your vault, the goblin revealed with a grin, sounding almost smug, and then he placed a vault key on the desk. Your vault key, Mr. Doe, the goblin added, emphasizing the Mr. Doe part, wanting to make Harry understand that he knew that his name was fake. Harry barely held himself back from cursing the little bugger. He wasn't expecting the goblin to miss the fake name part, but he should have expected the goblin to use some sort of excuse to get back at him. The expandable pouch was simply an excuse. How much gold did the expandable pouch cost? Harry grit out through his teeth as he grabbed the vault key. Not much, only 50 galleons, the goblin revealed sullenly. He was happy that he was able to get back at the boy, but at the same time, he was sad that he wasn't able to swindle any more from the boy. He wanted to charge a lot more, but doing that could have gotten him in trouble with MCU, and there was no way that they would take a goblin's side in the case. They would always support one of their own, so he had to settle with a measly amount of 50 galleons. Harry scowled at the goblin. 50 galleons were a lot of gold. Harry grabbed the sack and started to leave as there was nothing he could do to get back the gold. After leaving Gringotts, he made his way straight toward the shop where he could buy a part of a sphinx's brain. Any part of the brain would work, but he wanted the pineal gland, as the pineal gland of a sphinx's brain will give him the best results. It will cost him more, but he did have a lot of gold to spend. Harry started to wonder if he could finally start designing his mind palace after performing the ritual tonight. Building a mind palace was the next step if he wanted to progress his occlumency, as he never did things in half. Recalling memories and casting magic would also become easier for him if he built a mind palace. You can read Sherlock Holmes if you want to get an idea on a mind palace. I read that book when I was small, so I barely remember anything from the book, Lily suggested, and Harry nodded his head in understanding. Maybe tomorrow after the celebration he could pay a visit to the Muggle world to buy the said book or books. Chapter 43, The Boy Who Talked. When Harry finally returned to his apartment, half was his mind was feeling extremely giddy as he was lucky enough to acquire the pineal gland of a sphinx's brain, but the other half of his mind was still agonizing over the fact that he splurged 1,000 galleons in one go. If he had bought a normal part of a sphinx's brain, he would probably have to spend somewhere around 250 galleons, but he decided to buy the pineal gland of a sphinx's brain, which was much more expensive, and there was only one pineal gland in a sphinx's brain, so he had to spend 4 times more. He carefully placed the jar containing the pineal gland on the desk as he didn't want to drop it by accident. He might end up having a stroke if he dropped the jar. After that, he quickly changed into more comfortable clothes and started to prepare the potion he needed to draw the ritual circle. It took him somewhere around an hour to prepare the potion, and when he was finally done, he carefully placed the potion in a vial before placing it beside the jar on his desk. After that, he grabbed his notebook as he decided to run through the ritual for probably the 50th time. Running through the ritual theoretically, again and again, was much better than making a mistake. He wanted to avoid mistakes at any cost, as messing up anything in such a powerful ritual even in the slightest would be a messy way to die. They would probably need to scrap his innards from the walls, or there was always a chance that he might end up inside out. I think everything is good, Harry mumbled inside his mind as he ran through all of his notes, again. What do you think, Mom? Harry asked curiously as he sat down on the bed. I think everything is perfect, Lily answered after a few moments of silence. Harry released a huge sigh and slumped back on the bed. It was only noon and there were still somewhere around 11 hours before midnight, so he could only wait. His stomach rumbled, reminding him that he was yet to eat anything. Harry forced himself to get off the bed. He tossed the notebook on the bed and started to make his way toward the kitchen. He wanted to see if Norton had prepared anything or not. Harry arrived inside the kitchen and a smile bloomed on his face as he smelled the beautiful aroma of shepherd's pie. "The food smells awesome, Norton." "Thank you." Harry thanked Norton as he pulled back one of the chairs and sat down. Master Hadrian doesn't need to thank Norton. Norton only be doing his duty, and Norton knew that Master Hadrian would be hungry after he returns. Norton gushed out eagerly, but Harry could also feel that Norton was trying to scold him. Well, he couldn't fault his friend. After all, it wasn't unusual for him to forget about food whenever he got lost in his research. "I would have probably starved to death if it wasn't for you, Norton," Harry commented with a laugh as he finally dug into his food. As expected, Norton. This is heavenly. I was missing this during the trip," Harry praised with a huge grin as he started to eat with more gusto. "Norton only best doing his duty," Norton exclaimed shyly as he disappeared with a soft pop, leaving Harry to enjoy the food. Harry appeared inside the white space and his eyes immediately focused on his mom. After finishing lunch, Harry decided to take a nap. Not only did he needed to take some rest, but he also needed to meet his mom for the so-called talk. He had asked his mom if he could have this talk back at the mine, but his mom said that she didn't want to distract him from his task. What sort of talk were they going to have? Harry couldn't help but feel trepidation. He started to wonder how bad this talk was going to be. He hoped nothing too bad. "Hello, Hadrian, I am glad that you are here. Come here, let your mommy hug you," Lily said as he stood up from the floor. "Hi, Mom," Harry greeted her back as she pulled him into her arms. He also wrapped his arms around her as he hugged her back. After a few seconds, his mom finally released him and ruffled his hair. He simply smiled back at her, his eyes filled with adoration, love, and respect. "Come, sit with me. We have a lot to talk about and I think you will appreciate a seat, considering the topic," Lily said in an amused tone as she plopped down on the floor and started to pat the spot right in front of her. Harry gave her a soft nod as he sat down. "Okay. So, can we finally have this talk?" Harry asked nervously as he cocked his head sideways. Lily grinned at her son and decided to tease him. My. Aren't you excited? I wonder if you are going to feel the same when we are finally done," Lily mused in a sing-song voice. Harry shuffled uncomfortably after hearing his mom's words. For whatever reason, he started to feel that he wasn't going to like this talk. "Good, then. Let's start." Lily nodded her head in satisfaction as she finally started to give her son the talk. What Harry didn't know was the fact that Lily couldn't wait to see how her Hadrian's reactions. However, Lily also forgot to notice that she started to refer to Hadrian as hers. Time skip, 1 eternity later. Harry was right. He didn't like the talk at all. By the time Lily was done with the talk, his face was blazing red, matching Lily's hair. Harry couldn't even look into her beautiful green eyes anymore. Right now, he didn't even know if he could ever look into her eyes again. Then again, the only friends he has are also girls. Was he ever going to be able to look at them without his mind going into the gutter? What's more, he finally understood why he felt so entranced by the poster of the red-haired woman, and to be honest, he didn't know how to feel about that. Should he feel disgusted or should he blame it on his hormones? He knew that he couldn't place the whole blame on his hormones. After all, it would be wrong to blame his own actions on his hormones. After the talk, he finally understood what he was feeling. He loved his mom, he adored her, he respected her. She knowingly sacrificed herself to protect him. How could he not love her? How could he not adore her? How could he not respect her? He would do anything to make her happy after everything she had done for him, but he had no idea when his love turned into something so unhealthy. He didn't even know if his mom knew about his feelings and it was eating him up from the inside. He started to wonder how she was going to feel if she ever discovered how he felt about her. Was she going to hate him? Was she going to be disappointed in him? Was she going to be disgusted at him? Questions like that started to pop into his mind and his mind started to spiral into panic and depression. He didn't know what he would end up doing if she ever started to hate him, feel disappointed in him, or feel disgusted by him. While Harry was going through a mental breakdown, Lily couldn't help but feel giddy on the inside. She knew exactly what her Hadrian was going through. She already knew why her Hadrian was so transfixed by the poster of the naked red-haired woman, but this is exactly how she wanted him to feel. After all, this was the perfect time to place the idea inside his mind. Lily scooted over to Hadrian and he was so lost in his thoughts, that he didn't even notice her moving close to him. Lily slowly wrapped her arms around him and pulled his head into her bosom. Harry immediately froze in shock, but almost a minute later, he started to relax. He simply couldn't remain tense in her arms. He could feel her warmth easing his mind and body even though he didn't want to. For the next few minutes, neither of them said anything. The two of them simply decided to enjoy each other's company in complete silence. Harry could feel guilt and shame bubbling inside himself, and that is when Lily decided to break the silence. "Hadrian, there is no need to feel embarrassed. It is completely natural," Lily said softly as she started to run her fingers through his hair. Harry mutely nodded his head as he could feel that his mom was trying to comfort him. Lily finally separated from him and looked straight into his eyes intensely, making Harry blush. "Are you feeling bad for being attracted to me?" Lily asked with a serious look on her face, making Harry go stiff. Panic, guilt, and shame started to well up as he opened his mouth to speak up, but no words came out of his mouth. "MMO." Harry finally stuttered out, but Lily placed her finger on his lips, stopping him from speaking anymore. The panic, guilt, and shame he was feeling increased. Lily shushed him softly as she once again started to run her fingers through his hair and a smile appeared on her face. "It is all right, Hadrian. I am not angry at you. I know it may sound weird, but I am completely all right with it," Lily said softly, making Harry look at her in complete surprise. Harry stared at his mom like she had grown a second head. "Why you are all right with it?" Harry stuttered out and the blush on his face intensified as he realized that he ended up saying something he didn't mean to say. "Yes, I am completely all right with it. After all, it means that you find me beautiful, don't you?" Lily asked, only for Harry to nod his head only on pure instinct. Lily softly giggled and Harry finally realized that he was too late to deny anything, so he simply decided to look down in shame. Lily placed her hand under his chin and raised his head so that she could look into his eyes. "Hadrian, you don't need to feel bad since I am all right with it. I don't want you to see you moping over this," Lily said sternly, only for Harry to nod his head nervously. He didn't know how to react or what to feel. His mom wasn't angry at him. His mom didn't hate him. His mom wasn't disappointed in him. His mom wasn't disgusted with him. In fact, his mom was completely fine with his feelings. "Hadrian, I think you should rest now. It has been quite a stressful day," Lily said softly as she stared into his eyes. "You also have a ritual to perform," Lily reminded him and Harry nodded his head in understanding. Can I rest here?" Harry asked nervously as he wasn't sure how his mom was going to react. Lily simply smiled and pulled down his head over her lap. "Of course. Sleep well, son." "Good night," Lily said softly as she continued to run her fingers through his hair. Harry nodded his head and closed his eyes. Harry's breath finally evened out and Lily knew that he was fast asleep. Lily continued to run her fingers through his hair and a wicked grin appeared on her face. This went much better than she was expecting. She could have pushed him some more, but it could have backfired on her. She was completely satisfied with just planting the idea inside his mind. For the time being, after all, her Hadrian will never ignore her counsel. Chapter 44, The Boy Who Improved, 4. Harry took a deep breath and poured the potion he had prepared for the ritual into a stone bowl. He stirred the potion a couple of times before nodding his head in satisfaction. After that, he picked up a brush from the side and dipped it inside the potion. He wiped off the extra potion from the brush on the edge of the bowl and then he started to draw the ritual circle with the brush. It took Harry somewhere around 30 minutes to finish the ritual circle and when he was finally done, he started to re-examine the circle to avoid any mistakes. When he was finally satisfied with his work, he finally slumped down on the floor with a bit of a tired look on his face. He still needed to draw runes outside the ritual circle to stabilize the power output. The runes weren't necessary, but they were highly recommended. He decided to take a 5-minute break before he could start working on the runes. His mind was still reeling from the talk his mom gave him. Yes, he was much better than before and he was no longer blushing after every few seconds, but his mind was still recalling the whole conversation from time to time. He was glad that his mom was completely fine with his feelings, but he had no idea how to deal with it or if he even wanted to deal with it. He finally shook his head to clear his mind when he realized that 5 minutes were probably already over. He once again dipped the brush in the potion and started to draw runes outside the ritual circle. It took him somewhere around an hour to finish the runes, and after he was done he re-examined all the runes. He finally nodded his head in satisfaction after he was finally finished inspecting the runes. That's it, I guess. Now, you only need to draw the markings on your forehead, Lily pointed out in a relieved tone when Harry finally finished inspecting the runes. She was also inspecting the runes through his eyes, and she was also satisfied with his work. I know, Mom, Harry agreed while nodding his head. Hadrian, are you all right? Lily asked with a hint of concern in her voice. It was pretty clear that Harry was still reeling from the talk, so Lily started to wonder if she should have waited more or not. No, I am not, but I will be. Don't worry, Mom, I just need some time to wrap my head around everything you said, Harry answered tiredly after a few seconds of silence. Lily simply hummed and decided to wait according to his wishes. It was a good thing that he was trying to deal with it on its own, and if he failed, she could always give him a hand. It's almost time, Harry muttered after a few moments of silence and conjured a mirror and cast a spell to keep the mirror hanging in the air. Harry grabbed a much thinner brush from the side and dipped it in the potion. After getting rid of the extra potion using the edge of the bowl, he started to draw some markings on his forehead. It didn't even take Harry a minute to finish the markings, and when he was finally done, he nodded his head in satisfaction. Now that he no longer needed the mirror, he vanished the mirror with a flick of his wand. After that, he made his way toward his desk to grab the jar containing the pineal gland. Harry returned to the front of the ritual circle and placed it on the ground. After that, he opened the jar and carefully took out the pineal gland from the jar, and then he finally placed it inside the stone bowl, which still had some potion left inside of it. Harry started to bathe the pineal gland with the potion, and after bathing the pineal gland in the potion for exactly 3 minutes, he stopped. Then he grabbed the stone bowl and placed it over the smaller focus inside the ritual circle. Harry took a deep breath and glanced toward the clock on the wall. While magic and technology didn't play well together, a clock wasn't technological enough to stop working around magic. Though a clock might stop working if a spell is directly cast at it, but an analog clock won't have that problem. Only a few minutes were left before it was finally midnight. Harry took a deep breath and shrugged off his robes. The robes pulled down around his feet and a blush crept up on Harry's face. After almost 4 years, he was once again feeling embarrassed for bearing himself when his mom could clearly see him. The blush on his face intensified when his penis started to erect at the thought of his mom watching him right now. It's all right, Hadrian. It's nothing I haven't seen already. Lily's breath hitched as she tried to assure Harry that everything was all right. Harry didn't feel anything amiss and mutely nodded his head. He stepped over the bigger focus inside the ritual circle and sat down, cross-legged with his face still blazing red due to the embarrassment he was feeling. His occlumency was helping him handle his rioting emotions, but it still wasn't enough to suppress his disarrayed emotions. He slowly turned toward the clock hanging on the wall. He thought that maybe he could stop thinking about the unhealthy things if he kept an eye on the clock, but unfortunately, it didn't work. When both of the hands of the clock hit 12, his mind was still in the gutter. Harry groaned in annoyance, but he still initiated the ritual as his dirty thoughts weren't going to affect the ritual in any manner. He almost lost his consciousness when the pain finally hit him. He felt like someone was plunging a shearing hot knife into his brain. His head started to throb, making him feel like his head was going to explode. His forehead started to burn as the markings on his forehead lit up. His eyes were closed shut due to the mind-numbing pain, or he would have noticed the pineal gland glowing along with the whole ritual circle. Harry grit his teeth, and when he was just about to start screaming, the pain disappeared like it was never there. Harry slumped back on the floor and started to breathe heavily. His whole body was covered in sweat, but he couldn't stop smiling. The ritual was so powerful that he could already feel the improvements. His mind was much faster and calmer than before. He felt like an invisible weight had been lifted, which was weighing down his mind. Harry didn't know how to explain his feelings in words, but it felt amazing. Harry slowly stood up, his body still shaking due to the stress he went through during the ritual. He looked around only to find that the ritual circle was gone, only the pineal gland and the stone bowl were left behind, but the potion inside the stone bowl was gone and the pineal gland looked like someone had sucked out everything from inside the pineal gland. He decided to ask Norton to get rid of the pineal gland as he was so tired that he no longer felt like doing anything. A small part of his mind was telling him to take a bath as he was covered in sweat, but the rest of his mind was telling him to sleep. Harry finally decided to give in to his tiredness. He barely made his way to the bed and slumped down on the bed, face down. Sleep, Hadrian. You have worked really hard today. Harry heard his mom's voice as he slowly drifted into the blissful embrace of sleep. Time skip, 2 years. Days continued to pass as the days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and months finally turned into years. The world kept moving on and Harry continued to improve himself either through hard work or rituals. He finished the set of 7 rituals and gained poison immunity and flight along with a lot of improvements regarding all the aspects of the rituals. His mind and body were the ones which improved the most since the ritual to enhance his mind and body of the set of 3 rituals overlapped with the set of 7 rituals. His mind was way more sharper than before, and was much faster and calmer too. Meanwhile, his body was much stronger and sturdier than before. That was the basic gist of how much his mind and body had improved after performing the rituals. The ritual to enhance his desire ended up improving his intent. To be honest, he had no idea why the ritual improved his intent, but he wasn't going to complain since the results were quite good. The ritual made silent casting and point casting slightly easier for him. Thankfully, he didn't turn into a male Vila, which was always a good thing. The ritual to enhance his magical senses improved his magical senses, just like the name suggested. He ended up sacrificing an easel for the ritual, and now, he could sense magic. It felt like he had acquired a completely new sensory organ, which could sense magic in close quarters. This ability was going to be quite useful against subtle magics. Just like the name suggests, the ritual to enhance his magical control improved his magical control. Now, he had a much better grip on his magic, which also enabled him to prevent wasting magic while casting a spell. He still didn't have perfect control over his magic, but the ritual saved him a lot of work, so he was quite happy with the results. The ritual to enhance his magical power worked as it was supposed to. For this ritual, he used basilisk venom, which gave him poison immunity along with what the ritual was supposed to give him. Well, it wasn't exactly poison immunity. Calling it partial poison immunity would be more fitting as it didn't make him immune to all the poisons, but all the poisons or venoms, which were weaker or equally powerful to the basilisk venom won't affect him anymore. On the other hand, the ritual simply increased the density of his magical core to increase his power. Even though his magical core was still in the liquid state, it was much denser than before. The ritual saved him at least 2 years' worth of hard work, so he should have been incredibly happy with the results, but in reality, he was barely satisfied with the results. To be honest, he expected something more. A lot more from the ritual. After all, he had to spend 4,200 galleons for the basilisk venom. He barely held himself back from crying in blood when he had to hand over 4,200 galleons to Jacqueline for 2 vials of basilisk venom. Sleep didn't come to him that night. After that, paying 400 galleons of Thunderbird wings felt like almost nothing in comparison. And finally, for the ritual to enhance his magical reserve he ended up using Thunderbird wings, just like he wanted to. He didn't need to use the whole wings for the ritual, as he wouldn't gain anything extra if he used the whole wings and he would also have to spend somewhere around 2,000 galleons if he wanted to buy whole wings. There was no way he was going to spend so much money needlessly. If he could have gained something extra, then he would have spent the gold reluctantly, but after performing the ritual, he was quite glad that he didn't have to spend so much gold on this ritual. This ritual gave him the most disappointing results. Yes, he gained the ability to fly without any support, but he wasn't happy with the other results. The ritual was supposed to increase his magical reserve, but instead of increasing the size of his magical core, the ritual simply increased the density of his magical core, just like the previous ritual, but the improvement wasn't much like the previous ritual. Unlike the previous ritual, this time the ritual only gave him barely a year's worth of hard work. Even though he didn't gain much from the last ritual, finishing the set of 7 rituals gave him a lot of improvements over all the aspects. While finishing the set of 7 rituals was one of the crucial points in the last 2 years, those weren't the only crucial things which happened in the last 2 years. He also won the Under-13 tournament and he also beat Jacqueline in a duel for the first time in the last 2 years. Chapter 45, The time passed. To be honest, there wasn't much he could say about the tournament, except for it was pretty boring and bland. He breezed through the whole tournament without much difficulty and he finally understood why Jacqueline said that she wasn't anything special for winning the Under-13 tournament. None of his opponents could cast a stunning charm, which was quite surprising. Yes, a stunning charm wasn't something elementary, but he was still at least one of his opponents to be capable of casting the said charm. What was even worse was the fact that only 2 of his opponents were able to cast barely stable shield charms. Just like Jacqueline had told him, he wiped the floor with his opponents with close to no difficulties. He won the tournaments, which earned him a title, a trophy, and a sum of 500 galleons. While he didn't care much about the title and the trophy, he gladly accepted the award of 500 galleons with a massive grin on his face. To be completely honest, Harry was somewhat disappointed, but he knew couldn't place the whole blame on his opponents. For them, the world wasn't filled with enemies, so they didn't have the same drive to improve themselves. They were probably participating just because they thought it would be fun or something along those lines, and while he failed to gain some experience, which was the main reason for his participation, he didn't complain since he was able to earn himself a respectable amount of 500 galleons and the tournament was wrapped up in just 2 days. After the tournament, Harry received a lot of offers to be apprenticed. A lot of famous duelists offered to mentor him, but obviously, he denied all of them. Yes, it would have significantly helped him to achieve his goals if he had accepted the offer, but he would have lost much more if he would have accepted the offers. They would have tried to mold him into their image. They would have tried to instill their own morals into him and they would have tried to guide his actions. Worse, if his mentor turned out to be a so-called paragon of light, then they would have tried their best to stop Harry. If they couldn't, they would have sold him out to the Aurors or something along those lines, and there was always a chance that his mentor could turn out to be a Voldemort sympathizer, whose intention was to pass all of his information to the Death Eaters. Harry couldn't have that. He had his own ambitions. He had his own plans. He simply couldn't allow anyone to hinder his actions, and he also couldn't allow anyone to discover his mom's continued existence. It was his most closely guarded secret, and Harry would kill anyone to keep his mom's continued existence a secret. Even Norton didn't know about his mom's continued existence, and he wasn't planning to reveal it anytime soon. After the tournament, Harry was also asked for an interview. He knew there was no denying it, as he knew that if he denied the interview, then the press would be free to run their own stories. Harry was already a celebrity and his fame wasn't going to disappear no matter how much he tried. Though he would have to admit, the interview went much better than he was expecting. Flashback starts. Good morning, Mr. Potter, my name is Duncan Miller and I am from New York Ghost. As expected, just like me, our readers also have a lot of questions. So, shall we get started? The man introduced himself as he sat down on the opposite side of the table. Both Harry and Duncan had mutually agreed to hold the interview in one of the private rooms of a cafe, as Harry didn't want to have the interview in his apartment. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Miller. Please call me Harry, and I don't mind answering questions, but I won't be answering anything too personal, Harry said with a smile, and the man nodded his head in understanding. Of course, Harry, and please call me Duncan. Duncan returned the curtsy and pulled out a notebook and ballpoint pen from his pocket. Harry was slightly surprised to see someone use a ballpoint pen instead of a quill, but he simply dismissed the matter as it was nothing important. Okay then, the first question. How are you finding our country? Duncan asked curiously as he stared at Harry in anticipation. Simply amazing, I would say. I love the culture, the food, the traditions, and everything else, Harry answered joyfully. Harry's answer wasn't anything specific and he had no intention of being specific. Duncan smiled and decided to move on to the next question. I am glad that you feel like that. Though why did you decide to attend Ilvermorny, instead of Hogwarts? All of us expected you to attend Hogwarts. Duncan trailed off as he continued to take notes. Harry knew that it was a loaded question, and his answer could land him in a heap of trouble if he didn't deal with it correctly. Change of pace. While I would have loved to attend Hogwarts since my parents went there. Harry's voice hitched a bit as he had to act his part of being an orphan. But, I want to try something different, Harry added after a small pause as the joy returned to his voice. I want to travel the world and I could have happily gone to any other school, but the only language I know is English, so I ended up choosing Ilvermorny, Harry added while nodding his head. Duncan gave Harry an apologetic look when Harry mentioned his parents, but at the end of Harry's answer, he nodded his head with a smile as he continued to take notes. I see. I am glad that you decided to choose Ilvermorny, and I am sure a lot of our readers will be happy too after learning that. Duncan beamed at Harry. Let's change the topic for now. So, Harry, why did you decide to participate in the Under-13 tournament? Duncan asked as he took a sip from his juice glass. As you know, Duncan, I am already quite famous around the world, but I am famous for something I don't remember. I was only a year old when it happened, so I wanted to make a name for myself, which I can remember, something I worked for, Harry answered with a determined look on his face. Ah. I understand. So, what are your thoughts about the tournament? Duncan asked as he inclined his head to the side. I had a lot of fun and I was finally able to see where I stand against my peers. Harry once again decided to skirt around the question. Harry knew that anyone with a good head on top of their shoulders would know that Harry didn't find the tournament challenging in the slightest, so they might think that Harry was mocking his opponents if he said the wrong thing. So, are you planning to participate in the under-15 tournament too? Duncan asked curiously as he stopped taking notes and stared into Harry's eyes. Yes, once again, it will be a nice opportunity to test myself against my peers and I am not going to miss such a great opportunity to make a name for myself, Harry answered with a bright smile on his face. Then I wish you good luck. Though I wish to know if anyone trained you, Duncan asked cryptically. Yes, Jacqueline Harper helped me out for the tournament. If it wasn't for her then I would have probably lost, and I would also like to thank my headmaster, Carlson Kent. He also helped me out a lot. Harry said with a smile while nodding his head. Harry decided to throw some appreciation toward Carlson as the man did help him out a lot by providing him with a training room and a ritual room. His comment will keep the man happy, which would make him more inclined to help. From what Harry has learned, Carlson wasn't a bad man, he was simply an opportunist, and if the man continued to help him then Harry would have no reason to deny him the same gesture, but if the man ever crossed him, then he would die, painfully. Jacqueline Harper, quite famous for her dueling skills. By the way, Harry, do you see yourself as a duelist as your future profession? Duncan asked as took some notes. Harry seemed to think for a bit as he tapped his chin thoughtfully. I will be honest with you, Duncan. I haven't thought that far in the future. It is an option, but I can't say anything for sure, Harry answered after a few seconds of silence. Harry had no idea where he would be by the time he killed Voldemort. Until Voldemort was dealt with in a permanent fashion, there wasn't much he could say. Completely understandable. You are still young and you do have a lot of time to decide what you want to do. Duncan said as he finally closed his notebook. Thank you for answering the questions, Harry. Duncan stood up and extended his hand toward Harry. Harry accepted the offered hand and shook it. I would also like to thank you for taking it easy on me, Harry said with a grin, making Duncan chuckle. What about some pictures, Harry? Duncan asked, and Harry almost cringed on the inside as he nodded his head with a bright smile plastered on his face. That was how the hour-long photo session started. Flashback ends. In the following months, Harry finally finished the set of 7 rituals and gained massive boosts all around, but even after finishing the set, he still couldn't beat Jacqueline due to the vast difference between their skills and experience, or maybe the difference between a solid-state magical core and a liquid-state magical core was vaster than he was expecting. After all, a liquid-state magical core is still a liquid-state magical core, no matter how powerful he felt after completing the set of 7 rituals. Thankfully, the situation finally changed after he finally performed the second ritual of the set of 3. Chapter 46, First Taste of Victory. For the second ritual of the set of 3, Harry ended up using a part of a Hungarian horntail's heart. The whole Hungarian horntail heart would have cost him somewhere around 35,000 galleons, and the gains wouldn't have been anything significant, since he wasn't planning to push the ritual too far and lose his sanity in the process. Additionally, the whole heart was ridiculously expensive. He simply couldn't bring himself to spend so much when wasn't going to gain much without risking himself. So, he settled on the next best thing. He decided to buy a part of a Hungarian horntail heart. Hungarian horntails are considered the strongest species of dragon, so obviously he decided to use a part of a Hungarian horntail heart for the ritual. The part of a heart cost him 3,000 galleons, which wasn't cheap, but he didn't complain much since he was more than satisfied with the results. The next day after finishing the ritual, he started to notice the improvements, and that is also when he realized how much his body was holding him back. It won't matter how fast his mind or magic could react if his body couldn't keep up, and that was the biggest problem he had been facing. Even after finishing the set of 7 rituals, his body wasn't strong enough or fast enough to keep up with his mind or magic, but that was no longer the case, so Harry once again decided to challenge Jacqueline. Flashback starts. Are you sure you want to taste defeat again? Jacqueline asked in an amused tone as she prepared herself for the upcoming duel. Even though she seemed to be joking on the outside, internally, she was really nervous. Harry was only 13, but he was already catching up to her, and she was 18 for fuck's sake. In the last few duels, she had to give it her all to defeat him, and he was slowly learning her methods, her techniques, just by watching her, and soon, he will overtake her. Before she started to train him, she thought that she was a prodigy, but after she saw how fast he was progressing just by watching her, she could no longer call herself a prodigy. To be honest, it left a bitter taste in her mouth. What was even more disheartening for her was the fact that Harry still had a liquid-state magical core, while her magical core was solid and she had to use everything in her arsenal to defeat him. Jacqueline didn't know how to feel, but she wasn't going to be a bitter person. After all, if Harry ever won, then he would win fair and square. Maybe, she could ask him for some ritual tips. He did acquire 2 vials of basilisk venom through her and she had been trying to narrow down the ritual he probably used it for, but there were a lot of rituals where you required basilisk venom, so she didn't have any luck there. Don't be too sure, Jackie. This might be the day you finally lose, Harry retorted from the other side of the training room, making Jacqueline chuckle in amusement, but her anxiety increased. She couldn't place her finger on it, but something about him seemed different today. She hoped that he wasn't pushing himself too far to gain power. We shall see, Jacqueline muttered and cast the first spell. Harry simply sidestepped to dodge the spell and returned the favor. Jacqueline also did the same, and moments later, the two of them were finally casting in earnest and Jacqueline realized that she was right. There was something different about him. He was much faster than before. The amused smile on Jacqueline's face disappeared as she stopped holding anything back. Harry also started to fight back with equal zeal. The duel continued as the seconds turned into minutes, and that is when Jacqueline finally realized that she wasn't going to win. Her whole body was drenched in sweat and she was barely holding on, and Harry wasn't even looking winded. Even though Harry still had a liquid state magical core, he was pushing her back. Jacqueline almost ended up laughing bitterly, but the thought of giving up so easily stopped her. So, what if she was going to lose? She wasn't going to just roll over and admit defeat. She would make it as hard as she could for him to win. With that in her mind, Jacqueline started to attack Harry with increased fervor, but Harry ruthlessly stomped down on all of her efforts. A part of her mind wanted to scream at him for being so good, but the rest of her mind couldn't help but feel pride. Yes, she was going to lose, but he was clearly better than her. Meanwhile, Harry also realized that Jacqueline was barely holding on, so decided to put more pressure on her. He had no idea what Jacqueline was going through right now, he just hoped that she didn't hate him after he beat her. Harry inclined his head to dodge the stunning charm and cast a knockback jinx at Jacqueline to knock her balance. Jacqueline turned to the side to dodge the spell, but she was too late. The spell grazed her shoulder and stumbled back as she lost her footing. It was obvious that Harry took advantage of this situation and hit her with a stunning charm. A bitter look surfaced on her face, but right before the spell hit her, the bitter look was replaced by the look of bitter acceptance. Even though Harry wanted to beat her so badly, he didn't celebrate after winning. While he was feeling satisfied, he knew that this was probably the beginning. Jacqueline was good, but she wasn't the strongest in her age group, or she wouldn't have lost in the under-17 tournament. There were bigger fishes out there, and wizards like Albus Dumbledore and Voldemort were in a league of their own. He clutched his hand with a determined look on his face. This was only a small victory for him, so he couldn't grow conceited. Congratulations! I know you have worked really hard for this moment, so there is no reason for mopping around. Lily congratulated him, breaking him out of his musings, and then she started to scold him as she could probably guess what he was thinking. Yes, it is a small victory, so what? It is still a victory nonetheless. I don't want to you throw parties or anything, but you should at least feel the satisfaction and revel in it, Lily added zealously. Yes, I do feel satisfied, but I don't know if I should revel in it, Harry chuckled nervously as he finally remembered that he should probably wake up Jacqueline. I am not telling you to grow conceited, but I am telling you to enjoy that feeling and remember it so that you never stop working to feel the same again, Lily explained, and Harry finally understood what his mom was trying to say. Harry nodded his head with a determined fire burning in his eyes before pointing his wand at Jacqueline, who was still lying on the floor. Harry cast the reviving charm and Jacqueline released a loud gasp. Fuck. Jacqueline gasped as she rolled over onto her back. I lost, Jacqueline whispered in disbelief as she raised her hand and stared at her wand solemnly. While feeling somewhat nervous on the inside, Harry stepped toward Jacqueline. Are you all right? Harry asked with a hint of concern clear in his voice. Except for me losing my dignity, I am fine, Jacqueline quipped as she slowly stood up. I knew that I would lose to you someday, but I didn't expect it to be this soon. Jacqueline shook her head before she released a defeated sigh. My shattered dignity aside, I am really proud of you, Harry. Jacqueline praised him with a genuine smile on her face. I am glad that you are feeling like that. I was worried that you might start hating me from now on, Harry said as he rubbed the back of his head nervously. I wouldn't hate you for winning, kiddo, Jacqueline said as she ruffled Harry's hair with a grin. She loved the fact that Harry never complained when she ruffled her hair. Though I don't think I can call you kiddo anymore. Jacqueline hummed thoughtfully. I am still younger than you though, Harry pointed out helpfully, only to receive a blank look from Jacqueline. Say, do you want some ice cream or some unhealthy food? Harry offered, changing the topic. Your treat. Jacqueline asked as she stared at Harry skeptically. She was quite aware of the fact that Harry hated splurging gold randomly. Sure, Harry immediately agreed. Yes, he didn't like spending gold leisurely, but he owed Jacqueline a lot of treats. Flashback ends. That was the first time since Harry won against Jacqueline, and from that day, he never lost against her. After that day, their roles also kind of switched, since it was Jacqueline who started to learn from him, trying to improve herself. He was only happy to help. Unfortunately, Brittany never shared their enthusiasm when it came to dueling, even though Jacqueline was one of her role models. Harry had been also meaning to reveal his real name to them, but every time he tried, he hesitated, and ultimately, he would decide against it. There were some other things, he wasn't going to tell them, but he still considered the two of them his best friends. As for not revealing his secrets, everyone has their own. Harry did have other friends too, but they were acquaintances at most. In the last 2 years, he also learned how to use firearms. The manuals obviously helped, or he might have shot himself. After learning how to use them, he realized that firearms were extremely dangerous, but thankfully even a pro could stop a bullet. The biggest problem was the reaction time, but this is where Harry's wand and enhanced magical senses came to his rescue. His wand would release a subtle whistle whenever he was in danger, and his magical senses also flared up. After a lot of arguments with his mom, he was finally able to get her permission to conduct a live experiment. As for the experiment, he mounted the handgun, which was named M1991, at some distance while he stood 20 meters away from the gun, and then he used magic to pull the trigger. He wasn't suicidal, so he obviously kept the aim a bit off, and that was the only reason why Lily agreed with his suicidal experiment. There were several things Harry realized after conducting the experiment. First of all, his wand released a soft whistle just before the trigger was pulled, and his magical senses also flared at the same time, which meant his wand and magical senses could also alert him against Muggle threats. Secondly, his mom's protection never triggered, which could mean either of two things. His mom's magic won't work against his suicidal tendencies, or it won't work at all against Muggle threats. He needed to conduct more tests, so he decided to use the submachine gun, which was named MP5 next. Once again, his wand and magical senses alerted him about the threat, but his mom's protection was never triggered. After that, he decided to test the assault rifle, which was named AK-47, and once again the same thing happened. His mom's protection never triggered, but his wand and magical senses warned him about the threat. He would have loved to test the shotgun, which was named Mossberg 502, but he wasn't that big of a fool. He was never going to test himself against shotgun shells. He also tested the knife, and it was really sharp. So, while he didn't know any knife technique, he still started to carry one with him along with the handgun he st. Ahem liberated from the Diavik diamond mines. He also conducted a lot of tests on the Kevlar vests, and currently, he was trying to replicate their properties so that he could enchant his clothes with the properties of a Kevlar. Chapter 47, The Plans in Motion. Headmaster's Office, Hogwarts, July 3, 1994. Albus Dumbledore stroked his beard with a soft smile as he stared outside the window. His plans to bring back Harry to Britain were finally complete. All of the pieces were in place now, he only needed to put his plans into motion. His plans to bring Harry back to Britain started back on March 16, 1993. September 11, 1992 was the day he acquired Tom Marvolo Riddle's diary from Ginevra Weasley, the only daughter of the Weasley family. In an attempt to disgrace Arthur Weasley, Lucius Malfoy planted the diary on Miss Weasley. It was a sound plan, and it would have probably worked if he hadn't done anything. The diary would have been a good test for Harry, but unfortunately, the boy wasn't here. As soon as Miss Weasley crossed the wards, he knew that the girl had brought something extremely dangerous to the school, but he didn't act instantly. He decided to take the wait-and-see route. Meanwhile, he decided to investigate how Miss Weasley came in possession of such a dark artifact. It didn't take him much time to discover how the diary came into her possession, and he decided to snatch it as soon as he discovered that the diary belonged to Tom Marvolo Riddle. Taking the diary from the girl wasn't that hard, and he simply needed to use a few well-timed words to make sure that the girl kept the knowledge of the diary to herself. Ginevra Weasley was quite young, but she was still a Weasley. Molly Weasley's and Arthur Weasley's influence would never allow any of them to betray his trust, at least, not knowingly. Even Lucius Malfoy won't be able to make a move if the diary went missing from her possession. Albus was glad that he was able to spare the girl from any suffering. He was also able to learn quite a few things about the diary from the girl, and he was horrified to learn that the diary had its own consciousness. What horrified him even more was the fact that the person answering the questions introduced himself as Tom Marvolo Riddle. At that time, Albus had no idea what sort of sorcery Tom could have performed to create such an artifact, but he was determined to discover its secrets. Albus also realized that there was a subtle compulsion charm placed on the diary, which would make the person in possession of the diary want to write in it. Albus was easily able to ignore the compulsion, but someone like Miss Weasley who didn't have mental defenses wouldn't be able to ignore the compulsion, so he didn't blame her for giving into the temptation and writing in the diary. Albus was also glad that he decided to acquire the diary when he did, because the diary gave off the same reading as Harry's scar, but on a much higher scale, which made him realize that the diary could probably reveal the mystery behind Harry's scar. He could feel dread welling up in the pit of his stomach for what he was about to discover, but this could be probably the biggest breakthrough against Voldemort. It took him months to finally discover what sort of artifact the diary was, and to say that he was horrified would be putting it lightly. He has long mourned for the man Tom could have been, but the existence of the diary made him mourn for Tom's humanity. Apparently, Tom had mutilated his own soul to create a Horcrux. As long as the Horcrux remained, the maker of the Horcrux, in this case, Tom Marvolo Riddle, would remain anchored to the world of living. To create a Horcrux, one must perform the vilest act. They would need to commit murder in cold blood to fracture the soul. Albus was sure that there were other steps involved in the process, but he wasn't sure if he wanted to know them. Through this discovery, Albus finally discovered how Voldemort was able to survive that fateful Halloween night, and it also revealed the mystery behind Harry's scar. Harry Potter was also a Horcrux, and his very existence was keeping Voldemort anchored to the world of living. That probably wasn't the worst of it. He didn't even know if the real Harry Potter was still alive or not. Albus cried the whole night when he came to that realization. He never mourned for Harry, since he still believed that he could still guide the boy towards the light, but the day he discovered that Harry was a Horcrux, he mourned for him. He hadn't been able to find any records of a person being turned into a Horcrux, and he wasn't planning to ask anyone. He would never trust anyone with such delicate and dangerous secrets. So, Albus was flying completely blind, but he guessed that there was a huge chance that Voldemort was able to take over Harry's body. After all, Harry did murder his family in cold blood, something Voldemort would have relished in. Then there was also a chance that his mother's protection was still protecting young Harry. Lily sacrificed herself so that her son could live. Her love protected the boy from the killing curse cast by Voldemort and reflected it back at the caster. Love was probably the most powerful magic, and he believed that the power the Dark Lord knows not to be love, since Tom had long lost the ability to love. At that time, Albus decided to shelf the issue since he didn't have all the facts. Half of his mind was telling him that it was Voldemort parading as Harry Potter, while the other half was telling him that it was still Harry Potter and the boy could still be saved. He didn't have enough facts to support either of his theories. He realized that he would need to watch the boy closely to make a conclusion. The fate of the whole magical world was resting upon Harry Potter, and he needed more than theories to make a decision. March 16, 1993 was the day when he started to weave his plans to bring Harry back to Britain. He was so busy with his research that he completely missed the fact that Harry won the Under-13 dueling tournament. It wouldn't have mattered even if he had seen the headlines, as it would have been still too late for him to act, and he also had other important things to deal with, such as his research on how to destroy Horcruxes. He knew Tom pretty well, and there was no way that the man would have settled with a single fail-safe. Harry's scar was proof enough, which meant Tom could have made more Horcruxes. Albus also knew that Tom was an extremely vain person, so there was no way that he would turn something random or mundane into his Horcrux. This made his task of looking for Tom's Horcruxes much easier. While it would have been better if he knew how many Tom was planning to make, he knew a person who might know. On the other front, his plans to bring Harry back to Britain were progressing rather nicely. He finally discovered a foolproof method to bring Harry back. He decided to use the Goblet of Fire. Yes, he would need to re-establish the Triwizard Tournament if he wanted to use the Goblet of Fire, but this was something he was willing to risk. After all, everything he was doing was for the greater good. Albus was expecting Tom to make a move back in 1991, but Tom never made his move. He didn't even try to infiltrate the school, but he couldn't blame Tom for not even trying anything. After all, Tom didn't have any reason for trying to slip into Hogwarts. First of all, Harry Potter wasn't at Hogwarts, and Albus also didn't try to use the Philosopher's Stone as bait. While his plans were coming along pretty well, he still didn't know how to bring back the Triwizard Tournament. He could use his own political clout to bring back the tournament, but he wanted to avoid any sort of direct involvement with the whole re-establishment of the tournament. For that, he needed to use someone high up in the Department of Magical Games and Sports. A few names came to his mind, but he realized that he would still need to work on his plans before making a move. He had been working on his plans for quite some time, and during this time he developed a habit of walking through the halls after curfew. He caught a lot of students during this time, but he always failed to catch the Weasley twins. From the portraits, he knew that the two of them were out of bounds after curfew, but somehow the two of them were always able to avoid him. This piqued Albus' interest, and he started to keep an eye on the duo using ghosts and portraits. He discovered that apparently, then two of them were using an ingenious map created by the Marauders to avoid him. The map was somehow able to pinpoint everyone's location in the castle. It was an ingenious piece of spell work, and it saddened him when he remembered the fate of the Marauders. Albus called the Weasley twins to the office to ask them if he could borrow the map for some time. It was an ingenious object and he wanted to see how it worked. The Weasley twins happily handed over the map when Albus promised to reveal the identities of the Marauders to them. After having the map for only 2 days in his possession, Albus discovered the name Peter Pettigrew on the map. This made Albus freeze in shock and surprise. Albus knew that Sirius wasn't the secret keeper, but truly believed that Sirius killed Peter during the confrontation. At first, he didn't know if should trust the map or not. After all, the map could have made a mistake, but after some consideration, he decided to address the issue. Casting a disillusionment charm on himself, he made his way toward the Gryffindor dorms. He arrived inside one of the rooms of the second-year boys and started to look around. According to the map, Peter Pettigrew was still supposed to be beside Ronald Weasley, but he didn't find anything besides the boy except for his pet rat, and then realization finally dawned on his face. Peter Pettigrew was a rat animagus. Albus flicked his wand in the air and stunned the rat. Albus had deactivated the animagus ward as it kept pinging him about Minerva all the time, but now he realized that he probably needed to reactivate that particular ward. Albus levitated the stunned rat and made his way toward his office. After arriving inside his office, he placed the rat on the floor and cast the animagus reversing spell. He wasn't surprised when the rat turned into Peter Pettigrew, but he was surprised to find Tom's wand in Peter's possession. With this development, Albus realized that he needed to modify or completely scrap some of his plans. He could get Sirius out of Azkaban and the man would be grateful to him for his actions. Having Sirius on his side will also help his plans a lot. Sirius will be able to claim legal guardianship over Harry, and the Black family fortune will also help them to fight the war. Severus won't be happy, but winning the war was more important. Then throughout last year, Albus has been busy extracting all the information he could from Peter Pettigrew. The man turned out to be a treasure trove in that regard, and then he spent the last month modifying Peter's memories as he couldn't allow anyone to know that he interrogated the man on his own. He also removed some of the delicate memories from the man's mind as he couldn't have those memories ever coming to light. While interrogating Peter, Albus also realized that Peter could help Voldemort regain his body, which also meant that he couldn't have Peter rotting in Azkaban, but that would come later. Before that, he needed to put his plans into motion. Albus sighed as he turned around and made his way toward the flue. He grabbed some flue powder and tossed it inside the fireplace. When the flames turned green, Albus placed his head inside the fireplace. "Good morning, Amelia. While I would have loved to chat with you, something urgent has come up and I would be glad if you come over." Chapter 48, The Friend in Need. Harry's apartment, July 4, 1994. Harry groggily opened his eyes and blinked rapidly as the sunlight filtering through was too much for his eyes to handle after waking up from sleep. He groaned as he rolled over onto his back only to find a tent on his duvet. He groaned softly as he slowly sat up. Recently he has been waking up with a heart-on, but it was yet to become an issue as it would usually go away after some minutes. Harry rubbed his temples and grabbed his glasses and wand from the nightstand. "Good morning, Mom." Harry greeted his mom as he released a yawn. "Good morning, Hadrian. How was your sleep?" Lily greeted him back cheerfully, making Harry wince in guilt. His mom could no longer sleep and he had been sleeping like a baby. "Don't you feel bad for not being able to sleep anymore?" Harry asked glumly, and Lily simply shrugged off his concern with an amused snort. "Yes, I do miss sleeping, but it's no longer an issue. It's not like I don't have anything to do here. I love the library you built. Even though I no longer have a body, I still love learning," Lily reminded him in an amused tone. In the last 2 years, Harry has been steadily progressing his occlumency. The Sherlock Holmes books helped, but he was nowhere close to finishing his Mind Palace, and without finishing his Mind Palace, he couldn't progress his occlumency anymore. Only a couple of months ago he finally finished the library in his Mind Palace, and since then he had been storing all of his memories related to books in the library in the form of books. He wanted to do something for his mom since she couldn't sleep. He was quite aware of the fact that his mom still loved reading books or seeking knowledge, so he knew that his mom would love the library he was building inside his mind. Giving her access to his Mind Palace was also not that hard, and just like he expected, his mom loved the gesture and she pulled him into her arms for a tight hug. "I am glad that you love the library," Harry said as he finally removed the duvet and climbed down from the bed. His feet landed on the floor and he stretched his body. He released another yawn before he started to make his way toward the bathroom. After finishing his morning rituals and taking a shower, he finally walked out of the bathroom wrapped around in a towel. He walked up to his wardrobe and started to get dressed in a pair of fresh clothes. After having the talk 2 years ago, he had started to feel rather uncomfortable whenever he bared himself since he knew that his mom was watching him, but those feelings disappeared throughout the last 2 years. After he was finally dressed, he started to make his way toward his study desk. In the last 2 years, he also finished up to the 7th year curriculum of his core subjects. In his 3rd year, he opted for arithmancy, study of ancient runes, and magical theory. He also finished up to the 7th year curriculum of these subjects and he decided to give xylomancy a try on his own, but only after a year. He gave up since xylomancy is really wonky. And as for astronomy, Muggle studies, and care of magical creatures, he didn't even bother to give them a try. Astronomy was completely useless from his point of view and he knew everything he needed to know about the Muggle world. Yes, he had become somewhat disconnected from the Muggle world after running away from the Dursleys, but he still visited the Muggle world from time to time so he could still move around in the Muggle world without drawing too much attention. He also found care of magical creatures completely useless for him. He already knew everything about magical creatures he needed to know. Avoid any magical creatures that are classified XXXX or above, and that was enough. Creatures classified as XXX were also dangerous, but he was confident that he could kill them if it became necessary and he wasn't planning to go looking for dangerous magical creatures in the first place. As for the remaining elective subjects, he was planning to learn all of them. At least on his own. He still had 2 years to make his decision. He wasn't able to acquire books from any of the shops as he was still too young, but Jacqueline decided to help him out by buying the books for him. Harry arrived at his desk and raised his brows in curiosity when he noticed the letter on the desk. It was a letter from Jacqueline. He picked up the letter and started to wonder what she wanted to talk about when they had already planned to meet in the evening so that she could buy the books for him. Harry quickly opened the letter and plopped down on his chair. It seemed that Jacqueline wanted to discuss something with him. He put down the letter and grabbed a parchment to write a reply, but he stopped when he felt Jacqueline trigger his wards. Apparently, she was already here. Harry immediately started to wonder what she wanted to talk about since she was already here. Harry stood up and started to make his way toward the door. Harry opened the door and found Jacqueline already waiting for him outside the door. The girl beamed at him and pulled him into a hug. She knew that there were wards in his apartment, so she also knew that he wouldn't miss her arrival. "Good morning, Harry," Jacqueline greeted him as she ruffled his hair after she finally pulled away from him. "Good morning to you too. Did you already have breakfast?" Harry asked, only for Jacqueline to shake her head in denial. "Good, let's see what Norton is making," Harry said as he welcomed her inside. Jacqueline smiled and followed him inside the house. The two of them arrived inside the kitchen and found Norton already working on breakfast. He was making mac and cheese. Norton didn't know Jacqueline was going to visit, so he served the duo some coffee as he started to prepare another serving. "Harry, I need your help," Jacqueline blurted out with a sigh after taking a sip from her cup. Norton's coffee was always so satisfying. Their house elf could never match this flavor even after she brought her house elf to talk with Norton so that her house elf could learn from him. "Sure. What do you need?" Harry asked with a smile as he nodded his head in satisfaction after taking a sip from his own cup. "I need a training partner. You know that I am going to try my luck in the trials, don't you?" Jacqueline asked only for Harry to snort in amusement. "I would have been surprised if you weren't planning to participate." Harry grinned in amusement only for Jacqueline to roll her eyes at him. "Yes, you know me so well." Jacqueline drawled blandly. "Well, either way, my mentor finally decided that he is too old to train me anymore and I am not going to look for someone else to train me at this stage. Jacqueline explained her situation and Harry nodded his head in understanding. He could also understand why Jacqueline wasn't looking for another trainer. Her new trainer would try to install his own techniques and style into her and she was simply too old to change her techniques or style. Okay, but I won't be able to help you after school starts. Harry immediately agreed to help her as he knew that he would also make a lot of progress while helping her. You don't have to worry about that. If we talk with Headmaster Kent, then I am sure that he will allow you to skip school since you will be also participating in the Under-15 tournament, Jacqueline explained with a grin, and Harry had to admit, she was right. Carlson was already nice to him, but after the interview where he praised the man, Carlson became more nicer to him. That could work. Harry mumbled as he tapped his chin with a thoughtful look on his face. Though I think Brittany won't be happy, Harry pointed out, and Jacqueline sullenly nodded her head. Just like Harry, she is also a bit of a loner, and even though she does have some friends besides Harry, none of them were close to her. Jacqueline seemed to think for a bit before an idea finally popped into her mind. We can always use one of the training rooms in school for our training, Jacqueline suggested, and Harry already knew that Carlson wasn't going to deny the request. Okay. So, when do we start? Harry asked excitedly. As soon as we can. The trials are going to take place in 7 months, Jacqueline answered. I was hoping that we could go and meet the headmaster today. What do you think? Jacqueline asked as she took another sip from her cup. Sure, let's visit him after breakfast and we can also buy the books on our way back, but is he going to be at school today? Harry nodded his head as he agreed to visit the headmaster today, but he wasn't sure if Carlson was going to be at school or not. To be honest, I don't know, but I wouldn't mind a short trip, Jacqueline answered with a scowl after a few moments of silence. Harry also shrugged after hearing her answer, and he was about to take a sip from his cup, but all of a sudden he froze when a certain idea popped into his mind. Jackie, you know how to make a portrait, don't you? Harry asked slowly, making Jacqueline shuffle uncomfortably in her seat. Chapter 49, The Man They Freed. Azkaban, July 5, 1994. Sirius Black shot up from his cot when he heard several footsteps heading in his direction, and the footsteps seemed to be in a hurry. There were some days when he was mostly lucid while the rest of the days he was barely coherent. Coincidentally, today was one of those days when he was mostly lucid. This was not good. Sirius frantically shook his head as he tried to back away into one of the corners. He did have visitors from time to time, but all of them would come to gloat or mock him, but this time something felt different. They seemed to be in some sort of hurry. Did they finally decide to give him the kiss? He wouldn't be surprised if they did. He had been tossed into Azkaban by that fucker Crouch and Bagnalled without a trail, so what's stopping them from giving him a kiss? Sirius slumped back against the wall with a defeated look on his face. There was no fighting it if they were really here to give him the kiss. He almost burst out laughing bitterly at his cruel fate, but he still remembered what happened to him the last time he laughed like that. Sirius stared at the ceiling of his dark room. Forgive me, James, Lily. Remus. Harry, Sirius mumbled solemnly. His eyes started to pool with tears, but he quickly wiped his tears with the rags he was wearing when he heard the door of his cell unlock with a loud clang. The door was pulled open and his hands went up on pure instinct to cover his face when the light filtered into his room. Sirius Black. A masculine voice called out softly from the door. Sirius blinked rapidly, his eyes trying to adjust to the sudden light. It took his eyes a few seconds to finally get adjusted to the light creeping inside the room. He found a couple of silhouettes standing at the door of his cell, and after a couple of seconds more, his vision finally cleared enough for him to clearly make out everything. Sirius lowered his hands and stared at the man who called out to him. Yes. He crooked out. His voice was raspy and cracked, which was not that surprising. He might have been able to hold on to his sanity in some manner, but that was it. Azkaban was not kind to its residents, and even though he was able to hold on to his sanity for all these years with those monsters prowling the hallways, it didn't mean that he came out unscathed. After all, some of the days he was barely coherent. Then there was basically the fact that the inmates weren't given much to eat, or the fact that there was no one to take care of the prisoners, or the fact that nobody cared about the health of the inmates. There were a lot of things Sirius could rant about, but now was probably not the time. My name is Rufus Scrimgeour. I am not sure if you remember me. We have received an order to transfer you to the Ministry holding cells, the man said as he stepped forward. For the next few seconds, Sirius simply stared at the man. Yes, I recognize you, Sirius said slowly as he stood up. He knew that there was no struggling or fighting them. They have their orders and they will carry them out. Sirius thought bitterly. His opinions be damned. The last time he met the man, he was only a junior Auror. Sirius turned a bit to stare at the others standing by the door. He didn't recognize any of them, once again, not surprising. He barely recognized Rufus Scrimgeour in the first place and he knew the man during the war. So, what's happening? Did you guys finally decide to give me the kiss? Sirius asked bitterly as he stepped forward. Before Rufus or anyone else could answer him, something else clicked in his mind. Rufus said that they were going to take Sirius to ministry holding cells, so they probably weren't going to give him the kiss. After all, he was currently in Azkaban, the nest of Dementors. This was probably the best place to give him the kiss if things didn't change dramatically while he was rotting in here. When he was still working as a hit wizard, the kiss was given in Azkaban. Maybe, they were planning to toss him through the Veil of Death. Yeah, that is probably why they are planning to transfer him to the ministry holding cells. Meanwhile, Rufus and the other Aurors winced at Sirius' bitter tone. What happened to Sirius Black, one of their colleagues, was simply horrible. There was no excuse for the grave injustice the man has experienced. What happened to the man was wrong and they only felt relieved when it happened. God damn it! The man was one of their own. He worked with them, he fought beside them during the war and he was sent to prison without a trial by Barty Crouch Sr. Not only that, Sirius Black was the Black family when he was sent to prison and the other purebloods would raise a massive stink as soon as the whole incident came to light. Minister Bagnold, bless her poor soul, will most definitely be blamed along with Barty Crouch Sr. who is responsible for the whole shitstorm, but the two of them aren't the only ones who were going to be blamed. The Auror department as a whole will be blamed for this. Rufus released a sigh, as he forced himself to stop thinking about all that glum stuff. No. Some evidence has, finally come to light, Rufus revealed after a small pause. We were finally able to catch the real culprit, Rufus added with an unsure look on his face. He had no idea how to reveal the truth to the man. Sirius stared at the man, looking completely stumped. Real culprit? Sirius asked dumbly. He couldn't make any heads or tails of the whole situation. Yes, Rufus nodded his head. We finally caught Peter Pettigrew, Rufus revealed, and Sirius' eyes grew wide in a comical fashion. Rufus was worried for a second, thinking that his eyes might pop out of his eye sockets. After a few moments, the shocked and surprised look on Sirius' face turned into a snarl. That rat bastard is alive! Sirius snarled in rage. Rufus could practically feel the anger rolling off the man. Yes, and we finally caught him thanks to Albus Dumbledore, Rufus explained, and his voice turned bitter when he said Albus Dumbledore's name. He knew that the man was probably up to something and Amelia agreed with him. Rufus had seen enough of the man and to be honest, he stopped trusting him during the war. The man was more worried about the death on the side of the Death Eaters than the deaths on their side. Sirius opened his mouth to say something, but he quickly closed his mouth. Albus Dumbledore helped them catch Pettigrew? How? Something didn't match. Before he was tossed into prison without a trial, he would have probably sung his praises, but he had a lot to think about while rotting in here. He was glad the man helped him, but he was no longer going to trust him blindly as he did during the war. We are going to hold a trial in front of the whole Wisengamot so that we could call off all the charges, Rufus explained when he noticed Sirius contemplating something. So, I am finally going to have my trial? Sirius asked in glee and stepped forward while nodding his head. About fucking time! He growled as he hooped his hands up in the air in complete joy. He could think about all serious stuff at a later date. He giggled at his own joke. Right now, he was looking forward to his freedom. Sirius passed by Rufus as he started to approach the door. The Auror standing by the door moved aside to give him some space, but all of a sudden he stopped and whirled around at his heels to face Rufus. He stared at him with a steely glare. Please tell me you are going to give that rat bastard a kiss? Sirius asked Rufus, looking extremely hopeful with a vicious glint in his eyes, and Rufus finally realized that he wasn't going to enjoy the boat ride back to the mainland. Director's office, DMLE. Amelia Bones wrapped her fingers on the desk and glared at the parchment in front of her. She fucking knew that something was wrong when Albus Dumbledore of all people handed over Peter Pettigrew to them. Amelia leaned back in her comfy chair and rubbed her temples. It was a massive clusterfuck. At least her chair was really comfortable, or the pain in her arse would have doubled. Unsurprisingly, she was completely taken by surprise when Albus Dumbledore handed over Peter Pettigrew to her. First of all, Peter Pettigrew was supposedly killed by Sirius Black almost 14 years ago, but there he was, stunned and tied. Secondly, Peter Pettigrew had a dark mark branded on his left arm. Thirdly, it was Albus Dumbledore who handed over the man to them. While she believed that the man wasn't inherently evil, she would never trust him as far as she could throw him. The man was up to something. It was a gut feeling, and in her line of work, she had learned to trust her gut. It had saved her life a lot of times. The man was also holding meetings with the minister regularly, which was a clear sign that the man was up to something. Then while interrogating Peter Pettigrew, they noticed several gaps in his memories. They wouldn't have noticed if they hadn't used Veritaserum to interrogate him. Using Veritaserum on an unwilling person was obviously illegal, but she knew the laws like the back of her hand. Peter Pettigrew had been declared dead 14 years ago, and as far as the law was considered, the man was a corpse, and there were no laws stopping her from forcibly feeding a corpse Veritaserum. The man had some very interesting things to tell them under the influence of Veritaserum. So, when the memory gaps were finally noticed, she called a couple of her Obliviator friends. It took them some time, but they also noticed the gaps. Yes, Albus did a marvelous job, but he wasn't an expert when it came to obliviations. Amelia snorted in disdain. The man had obviously interrogated Peter Pettigrew on his own, and then he removed the memories he felt were too sensitive for the others to know. How she hated the man! How much she wished that she could arrest him and roast him over coals, but it was never going to fly with half of the Wisengamot kissing his wrinkled old arse. Amelia scrunched her face in distaste. The man was obviously going to be praised for capturing Peter Pettigrew, while her department was going to be blamed when they weren't at fault. That bastard, Cornelius Fudge, will definitely push the blame on the previous administration and her department for this huge blunder. Amelia pinched the bridge of her nose. The whole thing was a fucking mess, and now she needed to find a way to deal with the whole clusterfuck on top of everything else. She also needed to find everything she could find about what Albus was planning, and there was only one man who could probably give her some clues. Amelia slowly stood up from her comfortable chair and made her way toward the flue. She grabbed some floor powder and tossed it inside the fireplace. When the fire finally turned green, she took a deep breath and placed her head inside the fireplace. "Alastair, are you there?" Amelia called out in a tired tone, because that is exactly what she was feeling. She hasn't slept in the slightest since they brought in Pettigrew, and it seemed that she wasn't going to be able to sleep for quite some time. Chapter 50, The Conspiracies Discovered, I. Director's Office, DMLE. Alastair stepped into Amelia's office and looked around. His magical eye started to spin wildly as he inspected the whole room, before both of his eyes finally fixed on the woman, who was rummaging through one of the cabinets, with her back turned toward him. The scarred Exora growled in anger and flicked his wand in the air, casting several stinging hexes at the woman's rear. A translucent shield shimmered behind the woman's back, and the stinging hexes harmlessly splashed against the shield. The woman turned around with a lopsided grin on her face. In one of her hands, she was holding her wand, while in her other hand, she was holding a fire whiskey bottle. "You are becoming predictable, Alastair," Amelia pointed out with a grin as she made her way toward her chair and slumped down. Alastair snorted derisively. "Never turn your back to your enemy, lassie. Did you forget everything I taught you?" Alastair growled in anger as he stamped forward. "I knew it was you as soon as you walked out of the flue. I have added some extra wards. I bet you missed them." Amelia rolled her eyes in exasperation at the man's excess paranoia, but she couldn't call it excess when it had saved his life multiple times throughout the years. "Constant vigilance." Alastair screamed, but he did turn around to get a look at the flue entrance. He mentally kicked himself for not noticing the wards, but he couldn't help but feel impressed at the ingenious idea of placing wards at the flue entrance, and then once again, he mentally kicked himself for not thinking of this method himself before everyone else. He prided himself for being ahead of everyone else. "What was the first thing I ever said to you?" Alastair asked with a sniff as he pointed his wand at Amelia. Amelia simply rolled her eyes at him as she pulled out 2 glasses from one of her drawers and placed them on her desk. "You praised me for not keeping my wand in my back pocket," Amelia drawled blandly as she poured drinks for herself and her guest. Alastair huffed in acceptance before putting away his wand. He intently stared at one of the chairs and finally sat down without any more complaints. Alastair grabbed one of the glasses and stared at the liquid intently before taking a sniff. He took a small sip and savored the liquid for a few moments before finally gulping it down. He nodded his head in satisfaction. "This is some good stuff," Alastair admitted sharply. "So what's the occasion, lassie?" Alastor asked gruffly as he took another sip from the glass, but this sip was much bigger than the last one. How is your protégé doing? Amelia asked, taking a sip from her own glass. If someone told her a couple of years ago that Alastor Mad-Eye Moody is going to choose his protégé from a fresh crop of cadets, then she would have laughed at them. She had a really hard time believing the fact that Alastor had decided to choose Nymphadora Tonks as his protégé. The girl was quite good, but she was clumsy as fuck according to the examiners. Yes, the girl is a metamorphomagus, which made a huge asset to her department, but the girl's clumsiness was simply ridiculous. According to the examiners, the girl could trip on her own shadow. She is doing fine. She has been progressing much faster than I was expecting. She is a natural when it comes to combat, Alastor revealed with a bit of reluctance, making Amelia's eyes grow wide in shock. Those were some really high praises, especially when those were coming from a man like Alastor. Now, Amelia was looking really forward to having the girl in her department. Now, only if I could curb her clumsiness. Alastor mumbled with a displeased look on his face. I am worried that someday she might trip on the stairs and break her fool neck, Alastor grunted unhappily. Then all of a sudden, he gave Amelia a sharp glare. Now, cut the crap, Amelia. Why the fuck did you call me here? Alastor snapped impatiently. Amelia stared at the man, looking completely unbothered by his outburst. Have you heard anything from Albus recently? Amelia asked, sounding completely indifferent. The two of you are pretty tight from what I know, Amelia added with an accusing look on her face. Alastor stared at her impassively for the next few seconds. Ha! Alastor sighed and drained the remaining drink from his glass. We had a falling out back in 1991. I haven't talked with him since then, Alastor revealed as he stared at the empty glass in his hand. Why? Amelia asked simply as she grabbed the bottle to pour him another drink. Alastor grunted and extended the glass toward her. She poured him another drink. Alastor took another sip from his glass. He was still deciding if he should tell her the truth to her or not, but at the same time, he knew that Amelia was probably the only one who could help him get the answers he was looking for, and he also knew for a fact that she could be trusted. Albus lost Harry Potter back in 1988 and he wanted me to find the boy. Alastor revealed, and Amelia's eyebrows almost disappeared into her hairline in complete incredulity. What the fuck do you mean Albus bloody Dumbledore lost Harry Potter? He is a boy, not one of his bloody sweets. Amelia snapped, sounding completely bewildered. After the Halloween incident back in 1981, Albus shipped off the boy to live with some muggles. Petunia Disley Evans was the last living relative of Lily Potter. He believes that Lily Potter sacrificed herself to cast some sort of protection on the boy, which saved the boy from the killing curse, and he also believes that the protection extends to the rest of her family. Hence, he sent the boy over to the Disleys, Alastor explained with a huff. At first, he had believed Albus' words, but later he realized that there was more to it than Albus ever told him. Was? Amelia asked curiously. She didn't miss the fact that he used past tense when he referred to Petunia Disley. Yeah, they were monsters. They pretty much abused the boy regularly for almost 6 years. When he was 8, the boy was somehow able to summon the Potter family house elf, and then with the help of the house elf, he ran away. I have to give the boy the credit he deserves, even I wasn't able to find him, Alastor grunted and drained his drink in one go. What the fuck, Alastor? Why didn't you inform me about something like this? I could have helped. I don't care about his bloody moniker, but if the truth comes to light, then my department will be hanged. Amelia hissed as she drained her own drink. That would have been the most idiotic thing I could have done, Alastor drawled as he glared at Amelia. Your department is full of leaks, and if one of those upstanding impervious Death Eaters would have found the boy, then the boy would have been dead, Alastor griped unhappily. Amelia didn't have any retort to that. As much as she wanted to protest or defend her department, she knew she couldn't. She was quite aware of the fact that there were leaks in her department, but there was nothing she could do to fix it. Her department was already understaffed and underpaid. If she tried to clean the house, then she would have found herself thrown out of the office the next day. Well, moving along. When the boy turned 11, he decided to pay the Disleys another visit and murdered them. After that, he packed everything up before anyone realized what was happening and somehow buggered out of the country, Alastor scowled unhappily. Meanwhile, Amelia lost all color from her face when she heard that the boy murdered the whole family. How? WH. Before Amelia could say a word, Alastor decided to cut her off. The boy is smart, and if he is half as smart as I believe him to be, then we wouldn't have been able to pin anything on him. The clues I found would have been thrown out of court by any decent lawyer, Alastor grumbled unhappily. For the next few minutes, neither of them said anything. Amelia didn't even know what to say. When she decided to speak with Alastor, she wasn't expecting to open a can of worms. Albus told us that he sent Harry Potter over to the States for protection. I believe he was lying through his teeth, Amelia muttered to herself as she pinched the bridge of her nose. She was somewhat surprised that her monocle hadn't fallen off her face. Alastor grunted in acknowledgement. The juvenile murderer aside. What the fuck is Albus planning? Amelia asked with a groan. To be honest, she didn't want to put the topic of the juvenile murderer aside, but when even Alastor Mad-Eye Moody admitted that there was no way they would be able to make any of the charges stick, then it was a lost cause. That is why she decided to guide the conversation back to the initial topic. I don't know. Did he do something recently? I did hear that he has been visiting our dear minister regularly. Alastor huffed and extended the glass toward Amelia. She poured him a drink before pouring one for herself. After that, she started to tell him about the recent events. Alastor started to tap his fake leg on the floor with a thoughtful look on his face. I think he is planning to use Sirius Black to bring the boy back to Britain, which means Sirius Black can probably claim over the boy's guardianship. James and Sirius were pretty tight, so I wouldn't be surprised if James named Sirius as the boy's guardian, in case something happened to them, Alastor mumbled thoughtfully. Do you know if James or Lily ever made a will? Amelia asked with a frown, only for Alastor to shrug dismissively. He wasn't close enough to the Potters to know if James had made a will or not. Regardless, Alastor decided to get back to the topic. Amelia, I am not kidding, Albus is obsessed with the boy and I might have some clues behind his motivations with that. Alastor finally finished his explanation. Amelia also reached the same conclusion after listening to the whole story. Albus seemed to have some sort of unhealthy interest in the boy. What clues? Amelia asked with a clear interest in her voice. We had a falling out the last time we talked. He was really angry at me and in his anger, he slipped, or at least I believe he slipped. He said there are bigger things at play. Magic you simply cannot fathom or understand. So, I started researching. I started to look for magics I possibly can't begin to fathom or understand, Alastor explained in a gleeful tone. Amelia also leaned forward on her desk with an excited glint in her eyes. Love magic, I don't have a fucking clue how that works. Space magic, once again, no fucking clue even though I know how to apparate or create a port keys. Time magic, once again no fucking clue. Death magic, except for the killing curse or how to kill my enemies, no fucking clue. And finally, prophecies, Alastor revealed, and Amelia had to nod her head in agreement, even she didn't know a single fucking thing about the magics Alastor just mentioned. Through deduction, I was able to narrow the list even more. It might be love magic since Lily Potter sacrificed herself to save her child. If that's not love, then I don't know what love is. Death magic, since the bastard tried to use the killing curse to kill the boy, but I have a gut feeling that it's not death magic. Alastor shook his head with a grimace. And finally, a prophecy. I don't know much about prophecies, but I have a gut feeling that prophecy might be our best bet. To be honest, I don't believe in the hogwash, but Albus clearly believes in it, and I don't believe in prophecies because I probably don't understand how they work, Alastor revealed excitedly, and Amelia wrapped her fingers on her desk. Amelia hummed thoughtfully and drained her drink in one go. Who? You have clearly given this a lot of thought. I would have agreed with you if I had known anything about love magic, death magic, or prophecies, but I do know someone who might be able to help us. Amelia hummed thoughtfully and Alastor immediately grimaced. Spooks. You are going to call fucking spooks? Alastor practically snarled. They are worse than Albus in some regards. Alastor snapped, looking at Amelia like she had lost her freaking mind. Amelia shrugged unhelpfully. They are the only option we have. I might be able to get Croaker to help us, Amelia said slowly, and Alastor looked like he had sucked an extremely sour lemon. He hated working with the spooks, but he also realized that they were the only ones who could possibly provide him with the answers. Alastor, there is obviously a reason he wants the boy back in Britain, and I believe it has nothing to do with the murders. I want to learn everything I can about his motivations, Amelia added warily, and Alastor had to admit, she was right. Fine. Fine. Call that bastard. Alastor snapped unhappily and downed his drink in one go.